Fight back!
Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Health Justice Now, Single Payer and What Comes Next by Timothy Faust. And this is from the introduction. A secret scream rings through America. It rings down the sterile fluorescent hallways of our hospitals. It rings over our rural towns and our native reservations. It rings through our prisons, the bellies of our great cities. It rings in our farms and our fields, our streets and our sewers, our bodies and our blood. And we are cursed to never hear it clearly until at last we realize it has been our own mouth screaming and we are lost. A child born today inherits in that secret a new American squalor, the skeletal remains of the American cities, the bleached bones of the American suburbs. This secret is a birthright of continual exploitation, pumped for labor and drained of cash and then punished for the resulting suffering. Punished for being hungry, punished for being sick, punished for being pregnant, punished for being poor, punished for being black or brown, punished for being queer, for being unlucky, for being. At the base of that suffering is lodged a little truth, like a knot in the stomach. In America, sickness makes you poor, and poorness makes you sick. This is a book about that relationship and why it happens, and why it's unnecessary, and what we can do to fix it. The cosmic whirling of God's great slot machine has not determined that some people are fated to suffer while others flourish. We have the resources to take care of everyone, and yet we refuse to do so. Your medical debt and medical bills are unnecessary, but we have chosen to make them necessary. These are structural problems with structural causes, and many of them share roots in how we pay for health care. This is a book about health care and health finance. They are different. Healthcare is anything that helps you stay safe and healthy. It's a kind of freedom from and within your own body. Health finance is the method by which we as a country pay for that freedom and by which we decide who gets to have it and who doesn't. Healthcare is more than what happens to you in the hospital. Healthcare is whether your home makes you sick, or your food makes you sick, or your environment makes you sick, or whether you have enough money to afford the things that keep you healthy. In America, the structure of corporate health care has convinced us that some people deserve health care and some people don't. This is a book about that corporate health finance, about private insurance and private insurers. For half a century, they've convinced us that they're the only things that keep us or could ever keep us from the utter financial ruination of illness. They've sold us different inadequate insurance plans and persuaded us that this is a form of great liberty, while chipping away at our freedoms for profit and holding our bodies and our children's bodies hostage. This is a book about single-payer health care, a health finance model in which we pool our abundant collective resources to provide health care to all people. It is a common model across the world. As we will discuss in this book, we have the potential not just to enact a single-payer program in America, but to build the greatest healthcare program among any so-called developed democracy. Here is my profession of faith. I believe beyond any doubt that single payer is demonstrably sound and imminently feasible. I believe a properly ambitious and well-structured single-payer program will do more than any other American social program of this generation to soothe the burns, to resuscitate the spirit, to nourish the moral will of the American people. I believe it will loosen the loathsome manacles of American health finance, an exploitative institution that profits by plundering from us our own bodily autonomy and that anchors a larger exploitation that holds those whom we love as captive leverage to guarantee our servitude to abusive employers or domestic partners, to those who seek to dominate us both in the office and in the hospital. I believe this nation owes its people, whose labor has created its rich banquet, the safety and agency of healthcare. I believe this healthcare is greater in scope than that which happens upon an operating table. I believe that housing, food, income, and more, the components of basic human dignity, are healthcare. And I believe our work is that of striving toward justice for all people. And I therefore believe, I have to believe, that single-payer healthcare is our moral imperative. Single-payer is our tool. Single-payer is our weapon. Single-payer is our first step. But single-payer on its own is not the goal. This book is about health justice. Healthcare is personal, so I want to start this book personally by introducing two friends of mine, Steve Way and Kyle Kolick. They're two guys about my age, I'm 30, who live in North New Jersey. They're sweet, gentle people, and probably the most charismatic pair of friends I've met in my entire life. They make me laugh until my face hurts, and we like watching pro wrestling together. They're also being utterly broken by our American healthcare system, and it's keeping them from living their lives. Steve has muscular dystrophy. The muscle and tissues that hold his body together are eating themselves. He's doing pretty good, all things considered. He beat his original life expectancy of 18, and now probably has a long life ahead of him. Steve needs a wheelchair to move and a ventilator to help him breathe. The book, Health Justice Now, Timothy Faust. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters Series. On Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle. Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis. Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland. And Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at ThomHartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
It's Conspiracy Theory Thursday. Thank you, Sean. John Bolton, this is hysterical. He has feelings. He's sad. Seriously, this is the new sales pitch here from Jim Inhofe, Senator Jim Inhofe. Right now, John Bolton's very emotional about this. He's a human being. He does have sensitivities. Right. So, Alan Dershowitz says, quote, if a president does something which he believes will help him get elected in the public interest, that cannot be the kind of crime that results in impeachment. What if the Republican decides to suspend the election? Julio Rivera is with us. Julio is the editorial director of Reactionary Times. He's a columnist with Newsmax, American Thinker, and townhall.com, reactionarytimes.com, and his Twitter handle is Oh Yeah, it's Julio. Julio, welcome back to the program.
Thank you so much for having me, Tom.
Been a while since we've talked, my friend. So do you really want to live in a country, and I realize you're in Bulgaria right now, but you're a U.S. citizen. Do you really want to live in a country where President Bernie Sanders can do anything he wants?
No, I don't. I mean, it doesn't really make a lot of sense in a couple of different ways, and I just kind of want to put a couple of things out there. First off, I mean, Bernie Sanders talked previously about, raising the income tax level for anyone making over, I believe it was $500,000 up to at least 75%.
Right, where it was when Reagan came into office.
But I was looking here at, this is from the Forbes 400 richest Americans list, which these are all billionaires, but their total aggregate wealth as of 2017 was only $2.7 trillion. I mean, the total federal budget in the United States in 2019 was $4.5 trillion. So if you could tax these people at 100%, and you wouldn't even be able to carry the total federal budget.
I think you're missing the point of my question,
year.
Julio. The impeachment process here. You've got the attorney for the president saying that the president can commit crimes, specific crimes, things that are against the law. But if he does it because he believes that his being president is in the public interest, and he's doing it in order to get himself reelected, that's just fine. So if Bernie Sanders or Elizabeth Warren was president of the United States and they decided that, getting themselves reelected, well, it's time to put all the bankers in jail, or it's time to, or whatever. I mean, we could push the boundaries of this thing. I mentioned, one of the things that wouldn't surprise me if Trump tries to do is invoke the Patriot Act, and if he doesn't look like, if the polls look like he's going to lose the election, and just suspend the election. We're talking about the Senate being on the verge of basically changing our nature of government. I mean, the most important defining characteristic of an authoritarian dictatorship is that the authoritarian leader uses the power of the state to maintain his own personal power. And that's what, divided government, three separate branches that are co-equal, was designed to prevent. And Mitch McConnell is about to take that down. And the rationale is because, Trump could commit a crime, but he believed it was in the public interest. I would be astonished, frankly, if a guy who is as committed to the principles of liberty as you are agreed with this.
Well, I think that what you're doing is you're spinning a golden yarn here, and I don't agree with the direction that you're taking it. First off, what occurred between President Trump and Zelensky on the phone call was not a quid pro quo, as they're saying. Regardless of however Dershowitz wants to frame it, I wasn't necessarily ecstatic with the presentation that he made and the statement that he made as far as the way that he was trying to frame it to be. The fact of the matter is, and I brought this up, I believe, the last time that we spoke. Burisma Holdings is a corrupt energy company, which is partially, basically, the Ukrainian government, subsidizes it to a certain degree, and we subsidize the Ukrainian government to a certain degree. So President Trump had every right to ask the president, maybe we should look into this. Why is Hunter Biden making $1 million a year? For somebody who has no experience in the energy sector. And I think that the reason that everybody's been going after the president is that there's been a culture amongst the political class in this country, and this is something that you should be upset with too, where this is like the Pelosi's, the Obamas, the Clintons, even the Romneys have always taken advantage of their political class here to make deals with these foreign entities, peddling their influence, and that's something that, quite frankly, has to stop. So
yeah, I agree. Jared Kushner,
and even Zelensky.
CNBC right now is reporting that back in November of 2017, when Jared Kushner's company was $1 billion underwater and he was desperately seeking money, that he went with Trump to China and met with a whole large group of billionaire investors in China. And just a few months before that, his sister, Nicole Kushner-Meyer, had gone to China and had told, this was recorded, it was caught on tape, told these Chinese investors that if they put $500,000 into a Kushner property in New York, they would qualify for a green card in the United States. We don't know what kind of a pitch Kushner made. We do know that a few months later, Brookfield Properties, which is a Qatar-backed company that has Chinese connections, gave the Kushners $1 billion, or basically bailed them out. But CNBC has filed a Freedom of Information Act thing against the State Department. They filed this 2.5 years ago, and the State Department just gave them a date. They said, okay, we'll provide you with the information in July of next year, after the election. I'm with you. I think it's terrible that Hunter Biden was on that board. I think it looks terrible. I think Hunter Biden should testify and clear all this stuff up, whether he had anything to do with it. But there were dozens, hundreds of corrupt companies in Ukraine. And Donald Trump only had an interest in the one whose son, on whose board was the son of the guy that was most likely going to be his opposition candidate and who was beating him in the polls, Joe Biden. So, this was nakedly political, Julio. This was not any concern about general corruption. Come on, you know that.
Not necessarily, because I think a lot of things have been dispelled here as far as the United States. The Democrats were trying to say that, President Trump put national security interests, to threw it to the wayside by withholding this aid, which first off was never withheld. We never, the Javelin surface-to-air missiles were delivered to the Ukraine, and that's the biggest mitigating factor to make sure that, that they're not invaded, that there's no land advancements into the Ukraine by, let's say, a country like Russia or what have you. So, I mean, I'm actually, Tom, I'm taken aback a little bit based on the way that the topic for the day was presented to me. I didn't know this was going to fall into impeachment. I thought this was going to be more of a Bernie.
No, that was the essence of it. If listen, Julio, if what the Senate does is says to Trump, to Donald Trump, yeah, sure, you committed a crime, attempted bribery, attempted extortion. But we're going to ignore that because you were simply trying to. Was it
really attempted bribery and extortion, though? Are you not?
Yes, bribery is exchanging, for a government official, bribery is exchanging a thing of value for an official act. The official act was, I'll give you this aid that Congress has appropriated that he had held up for several months at that point. I'll give you this, and Ukraine knew it. I'll give you that aid if you give me Joe Biden's head on a pike. Basically, you take down Joe Biden's son.
Hey, they could have very well investigated and found that there was nothing wrong with what occurred, but the president had every right to act. Listen, what the Democrats are doing here is they're destroying the future of diplomacy. Anytime a future president, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat, picks up the phone and talks to another foreign leader and tries to figure out some things, there's going to be so much scrutiny.
But here's the thing: if the Democrats aren't successful,
how can we even communicate with other countries going forward?
If the Democrats are not successful, then future presidents will know that they can break the law and just say, tough luck, Charlie. I'm going to ignore you because I've got.
But he didn't break the law. The essence of the whole impeachment thing is based on: did President Trump enlist the aid of a foreign government to interfere in an election? You can't surmise that him asking for that investigation into Hunter Biden is interference into an election.
We have had 14 witnesses from within the Trump administration say that yes, that's exactly what Donald Trump did. And now you've got John Bolton saying, not only is that what he did, he told me that's what he was doing.
That's like Jim Comey saying, I was disturbed, I was confused and concerned with the way that President Trump said that he wanted loyal. Like, these are the impressions of people.
No, John Bolton has written
the standard that it would take to convict somebody in a court. Listen,
John Bolton is saying Trump just told me, hey, I'm withholding this aid until they give me Hunter Biden.
John Bolton has an axe to grind because of the way he was unceremoniously dumped, which he should have been. He should have never been a part of the administration. We don't need war hawks and neocons and nation builders in America anymore. We need to become more isolationist. I think you can agree with that,
So you're not concerned.
We don't need to go in and invade every country and have these trillion-dollar wars.
You're not concerned about the White House, the presidency, getting so powerful that they can basically ignore Congress and ignore the law on the verge of an election that may elect a genuine progressive who will deconstruct everything that you and all your buddies are, who will raise taxes back up to 74%.
Destroy a wildly successful American economy now.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Let's use your frame. Let's use your frame. Let's say, President Bernie Sanders or President Elizabeth Warren comes in and flips the economy upside down and says, you can't stop me, Congress, and that's okay with you.
No, it's not okay with me, but that's not what President Trump is doing. I think that listen, he's talking to a foreign leader. There's corruption, obviously, that occurred in the last administration. He just wants to find out and have it investigated. He didn't say anything other than maybe we should look into this. And that's more or less the I guess the way that the call has been framed by Adam Schiff, and this is more insinuations. People are making assumptions.
Well, I don't think what Trump says he wants to look into the CrowdStrike server.
You can't convict somebody on what your assumptions of what his intentions were. You have to actually find hardcore evidence that a crime occurred. Yeah. Listen, President Trump's civil liberties have been stepped on ever since he announced that he was running for president. It's been horrible this entire time. And there's no evidence that an actual crime occurred. It was just, this is diplomacy. This is him talking to a foreign leader, asking that some potential corruption be investigated.
Got it.
What is
Julio,
wrong with
I'm sorry. At 18 minutes, I can't stop the machine from throwing a hat.
No, I got you.
Yeah.
I got you. Yeah.
Julio Rivera. Hang on just a second, Julio.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
.com and the Twitter handle is, it's Julio, reactionarytimes.com. Thanks, Julio. Good talking to you. And welcome back. So, what do we do? I mean, this. I put this thing up on Facebook this morning, and what I wrote, and I think this is the issue. This is what we need to be concerned about. The single most important defining characteristic of an authoritarian dictatorship is that the authoritarian leader uses the power of the state to maintain his own personal power. Dennis in Aptos, California. Hey, Dennis, looks like you're on topic. What's up?
Well, real quickly, as far as Julio Rivera is concerned, if you have an R after your name, you can break the law and it's okay. It's only not okay if you have a D after your name. I wanted to bring up something with you, Tom. If 20 Senate Republicans drew a spine and decided to vote to oust Trump, which means he's out of office and he can't run.
Right.
He's disbarred from running for office anymore. He would be powerless. He would have no more power.
I know. Here's the thing.
Power.
It's the old saying from Caesar, or from Shakespeare rather. If you're going to kill the king, or if you're going to try and take down the king, you have to kill the king. I forget the exact quote, but words to that effect. Basically, if you fail, the king will kill you. And there's no doubt in my mind that at least 20 of the Republican senators think Trump is a despicable human being and a blot on democracy in America. But none of them are willing to say out loud to any of their colleagues, hey, maybe we should take Trump out, because they're afraid that they'll be ratted out and that'll be the end of their political career. They're cowards. This guy, Trump is a bully. And he, I'll have your head on a pike. We don't know if he actually said that phrase. It sounds more like the kind of thing Mitch McConnell would say. But, that's the message that they all got. And obviously, they're all dancing like terrified, people with a mouse on the floor. Oh, my God, I'm jumping up on the table. That's what's going on here.
But they all have to face a general election. And as far as who's going to have the majority the next time around, you have those senators in purple states, and I think if they vote either no witnesses, and I think even if they vote to acquit, I think those men and women are going to lose their election, because there's just what is it now? There's one poll that says 56% of the people want Trump removed from office.
Right, and almost 80% want witnesses.
At least.
Yeah. Yeah, and go ahead.
Okay, the other thing, too, that's come up this morning is what happens if there's a 50-50 vote. Mm-hmm. And I guess this Roberts could break it. I've heard Pence can't come in and break it. It's got to be somebody else, and it's got to be the Supreme Court justice. But also it's been put up that, no, it has to be 51. If it's 50, the Democrats lose anyway, which I think is crazy.
Well, there's a debate about this. In the Andrew Johnson impeachment, in one of the motions that led up to that thing, what was the Supreme Court justice's name at that time? It was Samuel something or other. Anyhow, he actually cast a vote. He cast a tie-breaking vote, as I recall. But there's really,
precedent.
Yeah, the rules are, they're kind of making them up as they go along. And we'll see. Rand Paul, well, I'll talk about that after the break. Stick around. It's 22 minutes past the hour. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. Back 23 minutes past the hour. So what happens this fall, let's say the last week of October? The polls show that Donald Trump is going to lose by a landslide. The Republican secretaries of state have thrown as many people off the voting rolls as they can, but these are red states, so it almost doesn't matter. And, you know, because people are still going to vote in the blue states and the purple states, and it's looking like Trump is going to go down in flames. And so he lobs some missiles into Tehran, and Tehran, you know, and Iran throws some missiles back at us in the Gulf and shuts down the Straits of Hormuz. And Trump says, hey, we've got a national emergency. Now, he has already declared a national emergency once. He did that so that he could access the military budget to build his wall, a section of which, by the way, blew over yesterday in a windstorm. Honest to God, Trump's new wall blew over in a windstorm. But anyway. So Trump is looking at this and he says, okay, I'm declaring a national emergency under the Patriot Act. I can do this. And I'm going to suspend the election. You know, the election's supposed to be November 3rd. We'll move it back a year. We'll move it back a month, right? We'll have it on December 3rd. I'm just going to move it back 4 weeks. And the Democrats go all hysterical and they try to impeach him. But the Republicans say, no, you can't do that. You know, we're with Trump. It's just a month. And then December comes and he says, you know, we're still at war with Iran. We'll have the election in January. And then January comes and he says, well, let's try March. And pretty soon, you know, it's the new normal and Trump is still in office. And Trump still has power. The single most important defining characteristic of an authoritarian dictatorship is that the authoritarian leader uses the power of the state to maintain his own personal power. He uses that power to aggrandize and assist himself, and he uses that power to punish his enemies, which is exactly what Trump is doing and has been doing through this whole thing. Now, the founders and the framers of the Constitution were, you know, very clearly understood this, and that's why they came up with this idea of a government that is shattered into 4 pieces. 3 distinct branches of government, and one of those branches is divided itself into the House and Senate. So that none of these 3 branches will end up with absolute power. And, you know, it held, more or less, until now. But now, you know, with Mitch McConnell promoting this idea that Dershowitz laid out yesterday, that he's trying to walk back a little bit on TV, but we all know, you know, this is the 3rd or 4th time he's done this. It's like his saying, oh yeah, his saying that when he got massages from underage girls at Jeffrey Epstein's island or mansion or wherever it was, he kept his underwear on, don't you know? Right. Anyhow, Alan Dershowitz's idea that as long as the president thinks that his presidency is in the public interest, therefore, if he's committing crimes to get himself reelected, that's in the public interest. Therefore, when Richard Nixon broke in, you know, ordered the plumbers to break into the Watergate Hotel looking for the Democrat, you know, to see if the Democrats knew about Nixon's treason in 1968, that was just fine. So when did this tyranny begin in America? Did it begin with Nixon? Did it begin with Reagan? Did it begin with Bush? Is it beginning right now? I'll share my thoughts with you right after the break, and we'll pick up your calls.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
When did tyranny begin in America? We'll be back. Our book today is Why Women Have Better Sex Under Socialism and Other Arguments for Economic Independence by Kristen Godsey. And this is from the introduction titled, You Might Be Suffering from Capitalism. The argument of this book can be summed up succinctly. Unregulated capitalism is bad for women. And if we adopt some ideas from socialism, women will have better lives. If done properly, socialism leads to economic independence, better labor conditions, better work-family balance, and yes, even better sex. Finding a way into a better future requires learning from the mistakes of the past, including a thoughtful assessment of the history of 20th century state socialism in Eastern Europe. That's it. If you like the idea of such outcomes, then come along for an exploration of how we might change things. If you're dubious because you don't understand why capitalism as an economic system is uniquely bad for women, and if you doubt that there could ever be anything good about socialism, this short treatise will provide some illumination. If you don't give a whit about women's lives because you're a gynophobic right-wing internet troll, save your money and go back to your parents' basement right now. This isn't the book for you. Of course, some might argue that unregulated capitalism sucks for almost everyone, but I want to focus on how capitalism disproportionately harms women. Competitive labor markets discriminate against those whose reproductive biology makes them primarily responsible for childbearing. Today, this means humans who get pink hats in the hospital and the letter F next to the name on the birth certificate, as if we've already failed by not coming into the world as a boy. Competitive labor markets also devalue those expected to be the primary caregivers of children. Although societal attitudes have evolved in this regard, our idealization of motherhood means that most of us still believe that baby needs mama, a whole lot more than papa, at least until the child is old enough to play sports. Others will argue that unregulated capitalism is not bad for all women. Yes, for those women lucky enough to sit at the top of the income distribution, the system works pretty well. Although women at the executive level still face gender pay gaps and remain underrepresented in leadership positions, on the whole, things aren't too shabby for the Sheryl Sandbergs of the world. Of course, sexual harassment still hinders progress, even for those at the top, and too many women believe that if you want to run with the big dogs, you may have to suck it up and ignore the groping and unwanted advances. And race plays an important role as well. White women do a lot better in aggregate than do women of color. But when we look at society as a whole, on average, women are comparatively worse off in countries where markets are less encumbered by regulation, taxation, and public enterprises than they are in nations where state revenues support greater levels of redistribution and larger social safety nets. Choose your data source, and you find the same story. Unemployment and poverty plague women with children. Employers discriminate against women without children because they might have them in the future. In the United States in 2013, women over the age of 65 suffered from poverty at much greater rates than men and dominated those in the category of extreme poverty. Globally, women face higher rates of economic deprivation. Women are often the last to be hired and the first to be fired in cyclical downturns. And when they do find employment, bosses pay them less than men. When states need to slash government spending on education, health care, or old age pensions, mothers, daughters, sisters, and wives must pick up the slack, diverting their energy to care for the young, the sick, and the elderly. Capitalism thrives on women's unpaid labor in the home because women's care work supports lower taxes. Lower taxes mean higher profits for those already at the top of the income ladder, mostly men. But capitalism was not always so savage. Throughout much of the 20th century, state socialism presented an existential challenge to the worst excesses of the free market. The threat posed by Marxist ideologies forced Western governments to expand social safety nets to protect workers from the unpredictable but inevitable booms and busts of the capitalist economy. After the Berlin Wall fell, many celebrated the triumph of the West, consigning socialist ideas to the dustbin of history. But for all its faults, state socialism provided an important foil for capitalism. It was in response to a global discourse of social and economic rights, a discourse that appealed not only to the progressive populations of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, but also to many men and women in Europe and Western Europe and North America, that politicians agreed to improve working conditions for wage laborers, as well as to create social programs for children, the poor, the elderly, the sick, and the disabled, mitigating exploitation and the growth of income inequality. Although there were important antecedents in the 1980s, once state socialism collapsed, capitalism shook off the constraints of market regulation and income redistribution. Without the looming threat of a rival superpower, the last 30 years of global neoliberalism have witnessed a rapid shriveling of social programs that protect citizens from cyclical instability and financial crises, and reduce the vast inequality of economic outcomes between those at the top and those at the bottom of the income distribution. For much of the 20th century, Western capitalist countries also endeavored to outdo the East European countries in terms of women's rights, fueling progressive social change. For example, the state socialists in the USSR and Eastern Europe were so successful at giving women economic opportunities outside the home that initially, for the 2 decades after the end of World War II, women's wage work was conflated with the evils of communism. The American way of life meant male breadwinners and female homemakers. But slowly, socialist championing of women's emancipation began to chip away at the Leave It to Beaver ideal. The Soviet launch of Sputnik in 1957 spurred American leaders to rethink the costs of maintaining traditional gender roles. They feared the state socialists enjoyed an advantage in technological development, and why women have better sex under socialism. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. The Supreme Court. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. So when did this start? Right? When did tyranny in America really start? When did the Republican Party stop being a political party that actually had, a set of values and principles and ideas that they were promoting and become basically, organized crime? Some people would suggest that it started with Nixon's treason. Back in 1968, LBJ, his vice president, Hubert Humphrey, was running for president. And LBJ cut a deal with the South and the North Vietnamese to end the war in Vietnam. He had the deal. They were going to announce it in September or October of 68, which, of course, would have made Humphrey the president, would have blown Nixon out of the water. And Nixon got wind of this, and Nixon reached out to the Vietnamese and said, just wait until after the election, I'll give you a better deal. This is from Lyndon Johnson's, from the LBJ library. This is the tape of a conversation between Lyndon Johnson and the Republican leader of the Senate, Everett Dirksen.
Well, now, what do you think we ought to do about it? Well, I better get in touch with him, I think, and tell him about it. I think you better tell him that his people are saying to these folks that they oughtn't to go through with this meeting. Now, if they don't go through the meeting, it's not going to be me that's hurt. I think it's going to be whoever's elected, and it'd be my guess him. Yeah. And I think they're making a very serious mistake, and I don't want to say this. Yeah. And you're the only one I'm going to say it to.
Yeah, and later on in that same clip, and I had the wrong clip here, but later on, LBJ, the meeting that he was talking about was the Paris peace talks, and, which the South Vietnamese ended up more or less boycotting, and that was the end of that. And, it's just, this is, and he was saying.
I'm calling you only after talking
hang
to
on
Rusk
just a
and
second
Clifford
here.
and all.
Sorry about that. So was it Nixon? Nixon committed treason to become president, used a foreign power to get into the White House. Was that when it started? Well, Nixon ended up leaving office. I mean, Nixon got run out of office. Now, it had to do with the Watergate burglary. We didn't learn about this treason. LBJ took it to his grave. We didn't learn about this until 50 years after LBJ was dead. But we know about it now. Or was it Reagan? When Ronald Reagan cut a deal with the Iranians to hold the hostages so that Jimmy Carter wouldn't become president. President Bani Sadr of Iran has written about that. The Christian Science Monitor, you can Google it right now. Bani-Sadr is his last name. That's he was the president of Iran in 1980, and he wrote an op-ed in the Christian Science Monitor in which he said that, Reagan cut a deal with Khomeini to hold the hostages. He tried to free the hostages. He was elected president in September of 1980 on a platform of freeing the hostages. With 74% of the vote, he won. He went to Khomeini, and Khomeini said, no, we got to deal with Reagan. We're going to hold the hostages until Reagan becomes president, and then he's going to sell us weapons, which is exactly what happened. And who bailed Reagan out on that? And his vice president, George Herbert Walker Bush, who was in on it? It was Bill Barr as Attorney General in 1992. Bill Barr told George H.W. Bush, pardon Caspar Weinberger, pardon the three guys that Larry Walsh has already gotten convictions against, and pardon, there was one other guy, I forget his name, pardon all five of them. And it shut down the Iran-Contra investigation. That was the end of it. Elliot Abrams got pardoned. No, it was Ollie North was the other guy. Pardon them all. Or was it in 2000 when Jeb Bush committed treason? Now, Jeb Bush was the first one of the three that didn't involve a foreign power. Instead, he went to Texas. Right? He had Catherine Harris get a list of Texas felons and compare that list of Texas felons, more than half of whom were either black or Hispanic. Compare that, and the name pool for African Americans and for Hispanics is much smaller than the name pool for white people in general. And I've talked about this in the last couple of days. I won't repeat the whole rant again, but that's what he did, and he compared that with a list of Florida voters. And when they found a bunch of people who had similar names, they didn't even have to match perfectly. Jimmy Johnson and James Johnson and James Q. Johnson and James L. Johnson, they were all the same person. And he pushed somewhere between 20 and 90,000 African Americans off the voting rolls in Florida, depending on whose lawsuit you're believing. And as a result, he got his brother within a few hundred votes of becoming president. Was it that treason? I mean, each one of these. And now you've got Donald Trump. This is the fourth Republican president. As I keep saying, we have not had a legitimately elected Republican president since Dwight Eisenhower. This is the fourth Republican president who used treason to become president. He reached out to a foreign power. In this case, it was Russia, and they helped him out. He said, Russia, get those emails, and they sure enough did. And now he's saying, hey, Ukraine, take down Joe Biden's son for me. Oh, and by the way, China, would you do it too? We've got two meetings now that we know. It's a matter of public record that Donald Trump has talked with President Xi of China about Joe Biden's son getting money for his hedge fund from a Chinese investment group. Just like Jared Kushner did. But you think Jared Kushner is going to be the topic of conversation? Somehow I doubt it. So when do you think it started? Nick in Santa Barbara. Hey, Nick, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Thank you for taking my call.
Sure.
I came from Eastern Europe like 20-some years ago, and kind of longer I stay here, I start finding some similarity in the rural area in this country compared to the rural area in Bulgaria where I came from. So in Bulgaria, in the rural area, they vote like 90% for the communists. And over here, I see the same similarity with the Republicans. So what is your take on that?
What you're saying is basically the people who are poorer or less well-educated are voting with the authoritarian party and leader. Is that correct?
Yeah, but how we can help them to see themselves and compare themselves and see if they like it or not. That's what I've been thinking lately. Yeah,
it's a real tough one, Nick, because when you've got government policies that prevent people from getting solidly into the middle class, that keep them in poverty, which we've had in the United States since Reagan, with Reaganism, with trickle-down economics. Now, 2 years ago, officially, fewer than 50% of Americans are in the middle class. It was over 2/3 when Reagan came into office. Same thing in Bulgaria, I'm sure, in the rural areas. Those people are never going to lift themselves out of poverty. So once you've got people in poverty, all you have to do is point at a third group and say they're the ones who are making you poor. You know, Hitler said, "Oh, it's the Jews who are making you poor. They're taking all the money with the banks and stuff." In Bulgaria, they would probably be saying it's the opposition political party. I don't know. You tell me. Here, it's Trump saying, "Oh, it's brown people from Mexico. They're taking your jobs." And 50 years ago, when it was Nixon, he was saying, and Reagan was saying, "Oh, it's black people taking your jobs," speaking to the white middle class that was that votes in large numbers. Who were the scapegoats in Bulgaria, Nick?
Well, it's basically the West is gonna destroy and cut all the Social Security and all this stuff. So the people were trying to preserve what the only kind of comfortable thing for them, the health care, the pensions. Mm-hmm. But they disappeared anyway. So I think
exactly my point.
Yeah, it seems to me people were too naive and want things to happen because they just vote. No, you need to do something about it. You can't just vote for Trump and wait him to fix abortion or whatever. It's your issue, You do it on your own. You can't just do something like a legit to make someone else do your job. That's what I'm trying to say.
I'm with you.
Well,
Nick,
thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you, Nick. I appreciate the call and your perspective. Donald in Aurora, Illinois. Hey, Donald, your thoughts?
Yes. How you doing there, Tom?
Good.
As far as I'm concerned, Tom, we lost democracy. We just don't know it yet. That's what's happening here.
Oh, I think
Congress no longer has...
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Congress no longer has oversight. And this business that we always talked about, how we bragged about how our democracy has checks and balances and the rule of law and all this other nonsense, all that was all smoking mirrors. And it only works when you got a government that's willing to abide by those rules. We don't even have that. We never had it. And all it took was a crooked president with crooked cabinet members and a crooked AG, and they commandeered our government.
Yep, you're absolutely right.
Even at the
And maybe, the good news here, Donald, is that maybe this is the wake-up moment for America. Maybe we will get a president and we will have swept into office a party and a lot of good progressives who actually believe in functional, clean government. And maybe we won't. Maybe we'll get Donald Trump reelected, and if he's or we'll end up with some sort of corrupt Democrat. I don't know. We'll have, but I think this is probably our last chance.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit ThomHartmann.com for audio and video archives.
By the way, the people tweeting, if you're tweeting at me about Julio, tweet it to Julio. Oh, yeah, OHYEAH. It's Julio, ITSJULIO. And welcome back. Let's see here, Dion in Carl Junction, Missouri. Hey, Dion, what's up?
Hey, Tom. On the subject of when tyranny started, I think it's just important to just remember American history. That it's impossible to not have tyranny and also have slaves. It's impossible to not be a tyranny and have half your population not be able to vote, or more than half. Depends on how far you go back. This country has always been a tyranny. I think the upside of the Donald Trump administration is that mask is off.
Well, we have been taking steps in the right direction. I mean, you're right. And when we started, we were separating from a monarchy, from a king who just, by decree just said, okay, you live, you die, my opinion, that's it, period. And we turned that into a form of government where a substantial minority or a small majority of Americans, that would be white men, basically ran the country. And then after the Civil War, in theory at least, for a few years before Reconstruction failed, African Americans were brought in. That happened in the 60s, I would argue, with Civil Rights and Voting Rights Acts. In 1920, women got the right to vote. So, we've been stepping in the right direction. It looks to me like we're now stepping in reverse.
Well, I don't think we've been stepping forward this whole time. I think you definitely agree that every time we have a Republican administration specifically, we take a step backward. we've taken steps backward with Nixon, and you kind of just covered it. But this progress has not been a line forward, and we just suddenly are going backwards.
It has been if you take it in 100-year chunks, but yeah, of course, it's all fits and starts. So yeah, we'll see. Dion, thanks for the call. Tony in Puyallup, Washington. Hey, Tony, what's up?
Oh yeah, what I'm really concerned about in the coming months, because if he does not get reelected, I don't think he's going to get taken out of office. And if he doesn't get reelected, that when he's a lame duck president trying to get us into war, what happens? Isn't there some kind of legislation trying to get put through that he has to get Congress's approval before he can get in a war with Iran or anybody else?
Yes, Ro Khanna has proposed that legislation, and the vote on it is supposed to happen today in the House of Representatives.
Today. Oh, wow. Okay. And then also, I wanted to tweet you, and I don't know how to tweet. What's your, can
My
you
Twitter handle is THOM_Hartmann, HARTMANN, Thom Hartmann. But if there's an underscore between Tom and Hartmann.
Okay, so are you, hopefully you'll keep track of that and let us know what happened on that vote then.
On Ro Khanna's legislation. Yeah, he was on this program on Monday, telling everybody, pay attention to it, call your member of the House. 202-225-3121 is the number for the House Representatives switchboard, and let them know that you support Ro Khanna's legislation to stop Trump from starting a war with Iran. And in fact, if that legislation, it was originally an amendment or a rider, I'm not sure what the exact word is, but I think an amendment to the National Defense Appropriation Act, the NDAA, and it got stripped off by the Senate. So now it's going through as standalone legislation. So call your member of the House and tell them support Ro Khanna. Tony, thank you for the call. And thanks for watching us on YouTube. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. And I would add, our full 3-hour podcasts are available over at ThomHartmann.com. Rudy in Atlanta, Georgia. Hey, Rudy, what's up?
Hey, Tom, my friend. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
That's why I have admiration for you, because you have enough courage to at least listen to people and hear the truth about what's happening in this country, because I was listening to a couple of the callers, and they're spot on. This country has always been in tyranny, but see, now it's in our face, and this is the blind spot. We've been so unwilling and able to turn a blind eye to all the things that's been going on in this country. So now we're in this position, so now we're running around frantic.
Yep.
This has always been a situation in this country, Tom, as a black man.
Yep. I get it, Rudy. So what do we do?
Well, I mean, I don't know, because this country's not going to be the same. It's not going to be the same after Donald Trump. It's just not going to be the same, because you're going to get someone that's going to be more sophisticated. You're going to get the lynch mob that's going to probably be more sophisticated. And here we go again. So this is a dangerous precedent that we're setting. And I wish I was an internal optimist like you, Tom. I mean, it just.
I just don't see an alternative, Rudy. It's like, you prepare for the worst, but you hope for the best and work for the best.
Let me say this right. Well, let me say this right here. Democracy will always come about because the pendulum, the pendulum will swing one way and it goes the other. But I think that this Constitution, as we see it, will not be. I think this is the death of this Constitution. I think this Constitution is done.
Well, and it's been done in large part by the Supreme Court. And this all, I could even build a case that this all started in 1976 with the Buckley decision, when the Supreme Court said billionaires can own politicians. Rudy, excellent points all. Thank you very much. Mike in Hope Sound, Florida. Hey, Mike, what's up?
Hey, I'm with Rudy, just let you know. And you know what? I do listen to you, Tom, and I will reserve my comments about Julio for the Newsmax website, which, by the way, is a horrible, horrible operation and a horrible owner. He's a conspiracy theorist, just like Trump. And my sympathies to the Vince Foster family because of Chris Ruddy. But as far as tyranny goes, there are so many choices, Tom. You name something. It's like a smorgasbord of treason. But you failed to mention the Southern strategy, which was a big
which was Nixon. Yep.
Education. Yep, and it's a big education because Republicans loved it. And they've used those kind of nasty, racist strategies in winning elections. And, of course, once they're in power, they do whatever they want, and they try to twist the Constitution. But to get in power before they had Russia's help, they ran out of options. Even racism and gerrymandering, they saw the end of the road. They had to reach out. Well, wait a minute. Let's reach out to an oligarchy. Yeah, that'll work.
Right. and that's what they're doing. No, spot on. Mike, thank you. Ken in Lafayette, Colorado. Hey, Ken, your thoughts?
Hi, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. Sure. I too will call. I called initially to comment on Julio. I'd like to get his Twitter handle again, but
it's it's Julio. OHYEAHITSJULIO. Oh yeah, it's Julio.
Okay, thank you. Mm-hmm. So to comment on tyranny, the previous callers were spot on. You're spot on. I think when Trump finagled his way into the White House, they realized, meaning Moscow, Mitch, et cetera, realized how compromised Trump was and how much of a buffoon he is. They can use him to fast track their, as you mentioned in your book, The Crash of Children's Thing, their robber baron mindset.
Sure. Tax cuts, deregulation. Right? Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. And then I figure we've got this fool who's allowed us to speed up the timeline, so to speak. And unfortunately, it's
now he's undoing the Clean Water Act that Richard blanking Nixon passed. I mean, it's insane. I got it. Yeah, Ken, thank you very much. Gar in Cherry Hill, New Jersey. Hey, Gar, what's up?
Tom, I want to go back to your discussion of when did the middle class end. But before I do, just quickly, I read your Hidden History of Guns, Hidden History of the Supreme Court. They are superb.
Thank you.
The Supreme Court book blew me away because it is so on point.
Thank you.
Anyway.
The voting book will be out in a week and a half. I think you'll like it, Gar.
Yeah, and the voting I've already ordered, and I can't wait. You need to write another one, The Hidden History of Republican Presidential Treason, which you discussed earlier this morning.
Yeah, although there's a chapter about that in the Supreme Court book, So,
yes.
Where it lays out the whole, Nixon committed treason, Reagan committed, it's right there in that Supreme Court book. It's in the middle of the book. It's around page 90, something like that. But,
yeah, because that was like a month ago I read it, but it's worthy of it's worthy of its own book. But I want to get back to your question about when the middle class was decimated. Mm-hmm. In my mind's eye, it's 1980 with David Stockton, and it became known as the Great Regression.
So you're talking about the institution of trickle-down economics, Reaganomics.
Reaganomics, exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And it became known as the Great Regression. If you were to graph from 1900 on, a graph of the value of productivity, you get about a 45-degree line. And if you were to graph a line of mean wages, you get a 45-degree line parallel to productivity until 1980.
Right.
And in 1980, the wage line takes a hard right and stays flat.
Yep.
For the last 39 years.
And productivity continues to increase.
And exactly. Yeah. If you want to measure this distribution of wealth to the 1%, graphically, it's the difference between the wage line and the productivity line.
Yep.
All of that money has been stolen from the middle class and it has been handed to the 1%.
Yeah, and best guess is it's somewhere between $3 and $7 trillion, which is mind-boggling. Gar, thank you for the call. Spot on. We'll be back. Let's see, what's going on in our second hour here? We're going to continue.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
We say fight back!
Today from Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISB. We're reading today from Guns for Hire, how the CIA and U.S. Army recruit mercenaries for white Rhodesia. It's a historical reprint of what appears to be a 1979 pamphlet, basically. This is from the introduction. It does have an ISBN number. It is available in book sources. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, actually this must have been published post-1980 because they're referencing Zimbabwe. In Zimbabwe, Rhodesia, 270,000 white settlers, mostly immigrated since World War II, controlled the government and economy, ruling over the 7 million black Africans. The Zimbabweans cannot vote. They have been forced off the bulk of the arable land, and they have no democratic rights whatsoever. All labor performance in Zimbabwe is black labor, and it is intensely exploited, often at less than subsistence wages. Zimbabweans have been fighting European invaders since the early 17th century. Since the 1890s, they have been directly ruled by Europeans, at first in the form of a private British corporation, the British South Africa Company. Since 1923, direct political rule has been in the hands of the white settlers, currently led by Ian Smith and his fascist Rhodesian Front Party. It's important to note that the white settlers were originally given this direct local power as a, quote, self-governing colony of the British government, thereby creating a master-caretaker relationship. During these past 80-odd years, Western imperialism, the multinational corporations of the United States, Britain, and South Africa, has extracted huge profits from the exploited and oppressed Zimbabwean population via the subsidiaries of the Anglo-Americans, Lonrho, Amax, AMAX, Union Carbide, Mobil, ITT, and other corporations. They fully intend to continue doing so as long as they can. The white settler minority has been rewarded for their violent subjugation of the Zimbabwean people with perhaps the highest national standard of living in the world. Sir Roy Walensky, the former Prime Minister of the Central African Federation, which included what is now Rhodesia, once said, "This man Smith has an appeal. It's the appeal of an easy life. For $6,000 a year, you can have 5 servants, a swimming pool, and a lot." Beginning during the early 1960s, however, the Zimbabwean nationalist forces under the leadership of the Zimbabwe African National Union, ZANU, evolved the strategy of guerrilla war to liberate their people and land. It is proving to be very successful. There are 20,000 guerrillas in base camps in Tanzania and Mozambique, over 3,000 in Zimbabwe itself, and this number is continually rising. In a meeting between Stephen Solars, a U.S. congressman, and the ZANU guerrilla leaders, they were reported to reject the possibility of enlisting the assistance of Cuban or other foreign troops, declaring that if we cannot liberate ourselves, we do not deserve to be liberated. Despite Western propaganda to the effect that the U.S. and British only wish to avoid a bloodshed in Rhodesia, don't forget the Zimbabweans have been bleeding for almost a century, their real fear is that the liberation struggle will win. With this victory in sight, it is not surprising that the counterattack by the Smith regime has become more vicious and brutal. Actually, this must have been published pre-1980 because this is when Smith was still in power in Rhodesia. More than 250,000 rural Zimbabweans have been forced into concentration camps. Terrorist raids have been conducted against Zimbabwean refugees in Mozambique. Dusk to dawn shoot-on-sight curfews have been instituted and enforced in the border areas. And escalating counterinsurgency attacks have been launched against the military arm of the liberation struggle, the Zimbabwean People's Army, ZIPA. It is crucial for Westerners to understand that the Smith regime has not stood alone in this barbaric campaign. This pamphlet documents the critically important element in U.S. imperialism's support for the Smith regime, white mercenary reinforcements for the fascist Rhodesian, quote, security forces. This flow of U.S. mercenaries to prop up white Rhodesia is an important, though secret, part of U.S. imperialism's strategy for Africa. The U.S. has massive investments in southern Africa. Zimbabwe alone supplies the bulk of high-grade chrome ore used in the U.S. for jet engines and other advanced technological items. Coal, copper, and other minerals are ripped out of Zimbabwe for U.S. industry. Mobil Oil, Texaco, Hertz Rent-A-Cars, Holiday Inns, and many other U.S. corporations operate illegally in Rhodesia through foreign subsidiaries. More important still is South Africa, the fortress of U.S. interests in Africa, where $1.5 billion is invested by GM, IBM, Ford, and other giant multinational corporations. The liberation of Zimbabwe would, for the first time, penetrate the buffer zone of satellite countries protecting the borders of South Africa. South African guerrilla fighters, who are already training by the thousands in camps in Tanzania and Zambia, would have direct access to re-enter their land and accelerate the liberation struggle. Knowing that the stakes are high, U.S. imperialism has worked to strengthen the white supremacist outposts in Africa, although at times this had to be done covertly. In 1970, the Nixon White House approved Henry Kissinger's Operation Tar Baby strategy, based on Option 2 of the Secret National Security Study Memorandum Number 39. This strategy essentially called for covert military assistance, including direct exchanges, so the South African troops could be trained in the U.S. in specialized tactics and weapons. This would be done while the U.S. tried to convince Africans that it was on their side. This is from the pamphlet number 39, that Kissinger memorandum. We would maintain public opposition to racial oppression, but relax political isolation and economic restrictions without openly taking a position undermining the United Kingdom and the UN on Rhodesia. We would be more flexible in our attitudes toward the Smith regime. And it goes on from there. Guns for hire. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Well, the show trial rolls on with the Q&A session. Yesterday, virtually all the questions that were asked by the Republicans, they asked the White House's lawyers questions so they would get their talking points on. And one of the questions even ended with, and in fact, I think it was a Ted Cruz question, ended with, and Joe Biden fired the prosecutor who was investigating Burisma and his son, or words to that effect. And the Democrats, there were so many lies in that one question that they rebutted the first 2 or 3, and they never got to the end. They never got to that one. And then the Democrats asked their questions. In both cases, it was like, in the high 20s, low 30s, the number of questions. And the Democrats asked their questions, and they were always asking them, I think maybe with one exception, asking them of the House managers, that is to say the prosecutors, Adam Schiff and company. Noel Castor Comedy, the Twitter handle is at Casler, C-A-S-L-E-R, Noel, N-O-E-L. I just retweeted this if you want to find it. He says, I got a message a couple months ago from a Navy medic who was stationed at the Pentagon and formerly the White House. Suffice it to say, many are aware of Trump's drug abuse. His trip to Walter Reed was not the first, but the third. He also told me Percocet was in the mix now. Right. And, what I tweeted was Donald Trump wouldn't be the first president to have used uppers, downers, speed, et cetera. I think probably the most famous one was Jack Kennedy, who, had broken his back in World War II and was in constant pain, and also had Addison's disease, which caused him enormous fatigue before the invention of steroids, which happened, I believe during his presidency. I think it was 60, 61, 62, somewhere in there. They came out with finally a drug that could suppress his immune system and calm down his Addison's disease, which was killing him. And that's when he started swelling up. His face got wider. But he would take amphetamines. He would take speed to get up in the morning and to go through his day. And he would take painkillers throughout the day and at night to get back to sleep. But I think with Donald Trump, it's gone way beyond that. I've seen him several times talking to the cameras, and he's just like speed rapping. You know, this guy, he's just moving right along. He is speeding like, you know, and people wonder, you know, why does Trump say some of the things he says that actually get him into trouble? Why does he have these moments where he accidentally spills the beans? Yeah, I think China should investigate. I think, you know, why does he do that? Well, because he's speeding. And, you know, if you've never taken cocaine or speed, you know, just imagine drinking 10 or 15 cups of coffee. I mean, to the point where you're just like so jittery that you can't really just restrain yourself anymore, and it's just bursting out of you. And then to further inhibit your inhibitions, further reduce your inhibitions, throw in some narcotics, which is, you know, why he can walk around and not look like he's in pain when he's you know, because his body's in pretty bad shape. Meanwhile, the Republicans yesterday in their question and answer session, and they will do the same today. I watched it for about an hour yesterday after I got off the air, maybe an hour and a half, and then I thought, this is just like, you know, I'll read the Cliff Notes version. But one of the ones that I saw was Pam Bondi, and I thought this was hysterical. I mean, this, Sean, Joyce, I'm going to play audio out of my PC here, out of my computer in just a minute. Pam Bondi was the Attorney General for the state of Florida. And I don't know if she initiated this investigation, somebody in her office initiated it, or she inherited it. I honestly don't know. But her office, the Attorney General of Florida's office, was investigating Trump University for fraud. Now, we know that it was a fraudulent scheme because Trump admitted to fraud and paid a $25 million fine when he was busted. I believe it was a court in Arizona. Because remember, it was the Judge Curiel, I think was his name, and he was Hispanic. His parents or grandparents were from Mexico, and Trump called him that Mexican judge in that interview with, I believe it was Lester Holt. So Pam Bondi, a great tweet here, Leslie on a Pike, Leslie007 tweeted this. Pam earns $115,000 a month as a lobbyist for Qatar, Qatar, you know, the country of the Middle East. She has no experience in the region and doesn't speak Arabic, and her law degree is from a minor school. So, you know, keep in mind, a woman who is being paid as a lobbyist for a foreign country is complaining about Hunter Biden like this.
Attended a couple board meetings a year, end quote. Here's what we do know. Hunter Biden did attend one board meeting in Monaco. Now, we also heard that when Zlochevsky, the owner of Burisma, fled the Ukraine, he was living in Monaco.
Oh my God, that nails it. She's got him. Come on. You know, you're taking money from a foreign government, and you're complaining about Biden's son taking money from a company in a foreign country. Really? I mean, you know, yeah. So Hunter Biden shouldn't have been on that board. I'll give you that. It was stupid. Hunter Biden himself said that. That's why I think he should be testifying before Congress. You know, he was questioned. A news reporter got him. Geez, what was this, 6 months ago? And he said, yeah, you know, in retrospect, it was not a good idea. I shouldn't have done that. It looked bad. But did he do anything criminal? No. Is Pam Bondi doing anything criminal if in fact she is a lobbyist for... No. Is Jared Kushner doing something criminal in the Middle East when he's trying to get $1 billion out of Qatar? I mean, ultimately what he got $1 billion in August of 2018 from Brookfield Properties, which is a Qatar-backed company. And that bailed him out. That saved his butt. When his dad got out of jail, and Jared was, you know, a young man about to make his way in the world, and this story's been told before, I don't recall if it was his father who told him this or one of his father's friends who told him this, but they said, Jared, you got to do 3 things in order to have credibility and avoid the fate your father suffered of, going to jail for the grift that is your family business in part. Number 1, you need to buy a newspaper so you can always get your own story out. And Jared did that. He bought, I think it's called the New York Examiner. He bought a rather small right-wing newspaper in New York City. He said, number 2, you need to buy a big building, a big fancy showpiece building. And so Jared went out and bought 666 Fifth Avenue, which is a giant skyscraper in New York City, iconic building, big building built back in the 60s, and paid a couple $100 million more than it was worth. And then number 3, he said you got to marry somebody who's wealthy and attractive and has a good pedigree. And he married Ivanka Trump. This was Jared's, I'm going to become something more than just, a grifter routine. Did Jared Kushner commit crimes? Well, we don't know, because the Trump administration, this CNBC reporting this morning, that in November of 2017, Trump was on a 12-day tour through Asia. They made a 2-day stop in Beijing. What wasn't on the White House or State Department agendas, but CNBC confirmed happened was, and I quote from this, this is an article from CNBC. It's by Kayla Tausch. Was, quote, a meeting with private equity investors convened by Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor, and U.S. Ambassador Terry Branstad. At the time of the meeting, the Kushner family was under fire for its pursuit of overseas investors, while Jared Kushner occupied a senior role advising the president on foreign policy. Well, gee, that's a little more, having your son-in-law hitting up foreign investors out of the White House. That's a little more than having the son of the vice president simply sit on the board of a foreign company where, he shows up for, according to Pam Bondi, 2 board meetings and, makes some serious bucks, but it's not corrupt or illegal. In fact, it's routine. But hustling foreign companies when you're in the White House? And immediately, again, back to CNBC, immediately prior to the meeting, Kushner's sister, Nicole Kushner-Meyer, when are we going to start talking about this stuff, about the corruption in the Trump family, the Trump crime family? In the months immediately, quoting from the CNBC article, in the months immediately prior to the meeting, Kushner's sister, Nicole Kushner-Meyer, referred to Jared at an event urging wealthy Chinese investors to buy $500,000 visas to come to the United States and participate in an upcoming New Jersey project. This was a construction project that was the Kushner crime family was doing. My words, not CNBC's. The Washington Post and the New York Times reported, back to the article, that investors in the Beijing sales pitch saw Jared Kushner's celebrity status as a draw. And then there was 666 Fifth Avenue. I'm, again, quoting from the CNBC article. The Kushner Company's marquee New York property with $1.4 billion in debt coming due and a search for a new owner coming up empty. In 2016, the company was forced to abandon a deal to sell a stake to China's Ambang Insurance amid concerns of a conflict of interest should Trump win the White House. In August of 2018, Qatar-backed Brookfield Properties announced it would pay up front for a 99-year lease on the building, erasing the Kushner Company's financial troubles. CNBC sought to learn about the agenda at the private investor meeting convened by Jared Kushner in China. A White House official confirmed the existence of the meeting to CNBC. The White House and State Department did not respond to additional requests for information. CNBC filed a request under the Freedom of Information Act with the State Department on December 11, 2017. For more than a year, CNBC emailed State regularly to check on the status. Last October, the State Department finally provided a date when they're going to release the papers on this meeting, July 23, 2021. 3.5 years after the original filing and a half a year after the election. Gee, what's going on here? Does this make Hunter Biden look like a piker? I think so. We'll be back. It's 18 minutes past the hour. What do you think about all this? How should it be played?
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
When do the Democrats go on the offense? I mean, there was a question yesterday from one of the Democrats, actually, about Kushner and Ivanka. And welcome back. 18 minutes past the hour. And, whew, boy, what a day, huh? Skip in Seattle. Hey, Skip, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Tom. Long-time listener and a devotee to your mindset. I would like to suggest that the Democrats could have a little fun with the Republicans by requesting a secret ballot vote.
It's too late. It's too late. That would have had to have been done on the first official day of the trial when they were debating the rules under which the trial would be held. And it was proposed, and it was shot down.
So they just print out 100 ballots, hand them out, and say, vote your conscience.
Yeah.
I think that's a wonderful way to show that everybody's afraid of retribution, and the secret ballot in this country is kind of like a time-honored tradition. So I appreciate your comments. Thanks, Tom.
Okay, thank you, Skip. Good to hear from you. Marta in Big Bear Lake, California. Hey, Marta, what's on your mind today?
Well, you're making me think about the rise of authoritarianism, and I'm connecting that to how we, talk to people that are of the Republican thought. I'm thinking about my own father, and he was extreme right-wing. He was racist, and I've tried to understand rather than just, hating him, but try to understand. And I think this might help us to understand the ideology coming from the puritanical religious background and philosophy based on individualism. Mm-hmm. And that leads to hatred of welfare programs. And, we can look at how, Hitler was celebrated because of the turmoil after World War I. And you're helping me understand all this, and also, going to college, doing a lot of reading. There was a lot of social upheaval in World War II, after the Depression, after the stock market crash. And my father was born right before the stock market crash. And to survive the Depression, his father had him painting houses at age 7. And he learned from that to just hate people on welfare. You have to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. He probably learned from his father to be racist and to hate people that get welfare programs. And, and so maybe he saw that the FDR programs did more harm than good. Fear of government spending and, big government power, fear of communism, really believing everything from, reading the Ayn Rand books.
Oh, geez.
And I read those. They were on the bookshelf, and I became somewhat libertarian, thinking, the welfare programs of Lyndon Johnson, it put, these horrible ghettos that, high-rise, horrible apartments where they just, put black people. And so it wasn't, as much hatred of black people, but just hatred of those kind of welfare programs. And so, I was susceptible to Ayn Rand kind of thinking, too. And then, reading Plato and, all of these things, just kind of form our whole social thought, not only in the U.S., but more or less in other nations, too. We see a lot of authoritarian, pressure.
No, I get it, Marta. And this is how indoctrination happens. And it's one of the reasons why we need to be sharing with everybody we know where they can find good progressive media, where they can find my show, Randy Rhodes' show, Stephanie Miller's show, whatever, just the David Pakman's show. There's some good progressive programming out there. People don't know it exists. Tell them about it. We'll be right back. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. So here we go. Bondi registered in July. Let's see what year this is. This is I'm looking at a piece in the Palm Beach Post. Yeah, it was November of last year, so this was July of last year. Pam Bondi registered under the Foreign Agents Registration Act as a part-time $115,000 a month lobbyist for Qatar. Now, I wonder if that coincides with the time when Jared Kushner was trying to get $1 billion out of Qatar, and Saudi Arabia barricaded Qatar. Qatar is this little kind of peninsula that juts out into the Arabian Sea there, or the Gulf of whatever it is, and they are, dependent on truck traffic coming in and out to get them food and stuff like that. Saudi Arabia cut them off, blockaded them. An ally. Qatar is where our military base is. It's where CENTCOM is. The American, where we stage our wars in the Middle East out of. And somehow we just went along with that. That was just fine, Saudi Arabia. Do that. And then right after Saudi Arabia stopped the blockade, Qatar gave $1 billion to Jared Kushner. And around that time, Pam Bondi starts taking $115,000 a month from Qatar. What the hell's going on here? I think it's time for a congressional investigation, don't you? Or are we going to end up, 50 years from now listening to tapes out of the White House like, the old LBJ and Nixon tape? This, I played the wrong clip earlier. I'll just play this just for the record. This is Lyndon Johnson talking to Everett Dirksen about Richard Nixon's efforts to blow up the peace deal that LBJ had finished and negotiated with North and South Vietnam. They were going to meet in Paris and declare peace in September of 1968. And because Nixon's treason was successful, that didn't happen, and Hubert Humphrey lost and Nixon became president in 68. And here it is. This is Lyndon Johnson talking to to Everett Dirksen, the lead Republican, senior Republican in the U.S. Senate.
Here's the latest information we got. The agent says that they just talked to the boss in New Mexico, and that he says that you must hold out, just hold on until after the election. We know what Chew is saying to them out there. Yeah, we're pretty well informed on both ends. Now, I'm reading their hand, Everett. I don't want to get this in the campaign. That's right. And they oughtn't to be doing this. This is treason. I know.
This is treason. I know. Everett Dirksen had such a cool voice. I always wanted to be able to talk like Everett Dirksen. He had such a cool voice. Anyhow, so that's, there's that. But boy, is there a pile of stuff with the Kushners. And Ivanka, when Trump... every time, it seems, Trump gets together with Xi, President Xi of China, Ivanka gets a whole bunch of new patents and trademarks on everything from shoes. Well, in fact, as Robert Reich, I believe it was Robert Reich, maybe it was Paul Krugman, but I'm pretty sure it was Robert Reich, tweeted, last week, and I shared this tweet with you when it came out, that the one exception to Donald Trump's tariffs on China was Ivanka's clothing line. She ordered over 100,000 pairs of shoes like the week after Trump imposed this tariff. Tariff-free. Why is nobody investigating that? 27 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with your calls right after this.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
Is it time to start investigating the Trump crime family in a serious way? Is it time to start lobbying the Democrats to do this? Or would it backfire? Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Medical Apartheid, the dark history of medical experimentation on black Americans from colonial times to the present, by Harriet A. Washington. This is from the introduction. On a sylvan stretch of New York's patrician Upper Fifth Avenue, just across from the New York Academy of Medicine, a colossus in marble, august inscriptions, and a bas-relief caduceus grace, a memorial bordering Central Park. These laurels venerate the surgeon James Marion Sims, MD, as a selfless benefactor of women. Nor is this the only statuary erected in honor of Dr. Sims. Marble monuments to his skill, benevolence, and humanity guard his native South Carolina State House, its medical school, the Alabama Capitol grounds, and a French hospital. In the mid-19th century, Dr. Sims dedicated his career to the care and cure of women's disorders and opened the nation's first hospital for women in New York City. He attended French royalty. His Grecian visage inspired oil portraits, and in 1875 he was elected president of the American Medical Association. Hospitals still bear his name, including a West African hospital that utilizes the eponymous gynecological instruments that he first invented for surgeries upon black female slaves in the 1840s. But this benevolent image vies with the detached Marion Sims portrayed in Robert Thom's J. Marion Sims, Gynecological Surgeon, an oil representation of an experimental surgery upon his powerless slave, Betsy. Sims stands aloof, arms folded, one hand holding a metroscope, the forerunner of the speculum, as he regards the kneeling woman in a coolly evaluative medical gaze. His tie and mourning coat contrast with her simple servant's dress, head rag, and bare feet. The painting, commissioned and distributed by the Park Davis Pharmaceutical House more than a century after the surgeries, as one of its History and Medicine in Pictures series, takes telling liberties with the historical facts. Thom portrays Betsy as a fully clothed, calm slave woman who kneels complacently on a small table, hand modestly raised to her breast before a trio of white male physicians. Two other slave women peer around a sheet, apparently hung for modesty's sake, in a childlike display of curiosity. This innocuous tableau could hardly differ more from the gruesome reality in which each surgical scene was a violent struggle between the slaves and physicians, and each woman's body was a bloodied battleground. Each naked, unanesthetized slave woman had to be forcibly restrained by the other physicians through her shrieks of agony as Sims determinedly sliced, then sutured her genitalia. The other doctors who could fled when they could bear the horrific screams no longer. It then fell to the women to restrain one another. I wanted to reproduce Thom's painting on the cover of this book, or at least in the text, but when I asked permission of its copyright holder, Pfizer Incorporated, the company insisted on reviewing the entire manuscript of this book before making a decision. As an independent scholar, I could not acquiesce to this, and I used another cover image. When I renewed my request to use the image within the text, Pfizer agreed to base its decision upon reading this chapter and an outline of the book. The Pfizer executives apparently were uncomfortable with what they read because they refused to grant permission to reproduce this telling image or even respond to my query after I supplied the requested chapter and outline. This act of censorship exemplifies the barriers some choose to erect in order to veil the history of unconscionable medical research with blacks. Betsy's voice has been silenced by history, but as one reads Sims' biographers and his own memoirs, a haughty, self-absorbed researcher emerges, a man who bought black women slaves and addicted them to morphine in order to perform dozens of exquisitely painful, distressingly intimate vaginal surgeries. Not until he had experimented with his surgeries on Betsy and her fellow slaves for years did Sims essay to cure white women. Was Sims a savior or a sadist? It depends, I suppose, on the color of the women you ask. Marion Sims epitomizes the two faces, one benign, one malevolent, of American medical research. Quote, "Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in health is the most shocking and the most inhumane." In 1965, Martin Luther King Jr. spoke those words in Montgomery, Alabama, at the end of the Selma to Montgomery march that had been attended by the black and white physicians of the Medical Committee for Human Rights. King had invited the doctors not only to give medical help to injured marchers, but also to witness the abuse suffered at the hands of segregationists. With these almost unnoticed words, King ushered in a new era in civil rights because, as Delegate to Congress Donna Christensen Christian, MD, chair of the Congressional Black Caucus Health Brain Trust, has declared, health disparities are the civil rights issue of the 21st century. Thus, Dr. King's alarm over racial health injustice was prescient, and were he alive today, his concerns would be redoubled. Mounting evidence of the racial health divide confronts us everywhere we look, from doubled black infant death rates to African American life expectancies that fall years behind whites. Infant mortality of African Americans is twice that of whites. The book, Medical Apartheid by Harriet A. Washington. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series. On Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle. Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis. Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland. And Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with you. Ever heard of the kafala system? K-A-F-A-L-A? It is a system of essentially institutionalized, state-sanctioned slavery. You bring people in from outside the country, and you take their passports, and you hold them in sleeping facilities, camps, where they're locked in, drive them to work in the morning, drive them back to the camp at night, low pay, dangerous work. This is the average income. Pam Bondi is making $115,000 a month from Qatar as a lobbyist. The average income, annual income in Qatar is around $115,000 a year. It's one of the world's wealthiest countries. But the citizens of Qatar don't do their own work. They bring in immigrants under this kafala system. Hans Christian Gabrielsen, the head of the Norwegian Confederation of Trade Unions, said, quote, see, these are brutal conditions that they hold these migrant workers in, said, quote, if we were to hold a minute of silence for every estimated death of a migrant worker due to the construction of the Qatar World Cup, the first 44 matches of the tournament would be played in silence. The government of Nepal alone reported that 1,426 of its citizens died working in Qatar over the past 10 years, with 111 of them this year. And Nepal is by no means the largest, sender of immigrant labor or migrant labor to Qatar. They're not immigrants. They're not allowed to stay. It's the kafala system. So what is Pam Bondi being paid $115,000 a month for by the government of Qatar? To tell us that Qatar is cleaning up their labor act and they're going to end their kafala system, which has apparently not happened. Nobody's talking about this in the news. Why? I mean, hypocrisy? A little? Carl in Columbus, Ohio. Hey, Carl, thanks for listening to WGRN. What's up?
Hi, Tom. You've raised the question of this behavior that the people are not reporting. I would like to, as I have previously suggested, that this is due to a genetic distribution. Many people do not have the personality, the drive, the intelligence to see these problems and act on them. And what's happening is that we're getting a form of government that we deserve. I'm sorry, I can't remember the attribution of that quote, but there is the statement that you get the form of government you deserve.
Right.
What we're having is people who are genetically and environmentally unwilling to put forth the mental effort to resist this. And
well, I don't think you have to have bad genes, Carl. I mean, this is, you now have fewer than half of America in the middle class, right? More than 75% of all Chinese people who are under 30 are in the middle class in China. We never hit more than 2/3, and that was when Reagan came into office, and it's been on a downhill slide ever since. People who are working 60, 80, 90, 100 hours a week, working 2 and 3 jobs, they don't have the time to educate themselves. People in America, where the media is owned by giant corporations and billionaires, and you've got cranks like Rupert Murdoch running Fox News, they don't know how to filter the news, Carl.
It's the same concept that Bill Gates and Microsoft used. It's called mind share. You keep your opponents so busy with little trivial things that they don't have time to think about what you're doing. Yeah. Computer mind share stuff.
Yeah, no, I get it. Carl, thank you for the call. I don't think that there are easy answers for this, and genetics certainly isn't any piece of it in my mind. Patrick in Long Island. Hey, Patrick, what's up?
Yeah, hi, Tom. The last caller, that was interesting, and I have to agree with the genetic part, but I have to disagree with that, but I have to agree with his synopsis of people and what you said, who are just overwhelmed. They're working 2 jobs, maybe they're working 3, the husband and wife, trying to raise their kids, and people just leave me alone at the end of the day. I just want to relax. Yeah. But what I think is vital in this is that there have been 4 or 5 Republican presidents in my lifetime, and they've all been crooks. They've all been thieves and connivers, I would say the same thing with the single exception of Dwight Eisenhower. And his vice president was Richard Nixon, for God's sake, who was as corrupt as you can get. He was taking bribes when he was vice president. Correct. Number one, it's a complicit media. That's all there is to it. I agree with what you said, that it would be very nice if Bloomberg would take his billions and start a new network, Yep. It is a lack of investigative journalism, both on TV and in the print world. Believe it or not, some of the greatest investigative journalism used to be in Penthouse. I remember Bob Guccione, yes. and Playboy also. Yes, in the 80s when the Meese Commission was running wild. And for that matter, Larry Flint funded some really good investigations for a number of years. If you want to talk porn publications. I think he offered a $1 million reward during Clinton's impeachment for anybody who had lacked fidelity in their marriage. For any of and actually that's how Bob Livingston got outed. And Newt Gingrich was the result of Larry Flint offering $1 million to anybody who could prove that any of the Republican floor managers for Clinton's impeachment were themselves having affairs during the impeachment. And it turned out that I think all of them but one were getting a little on the side, back in the office. Yes, Newt Gingrich was outside in the parking lot in his car. With Calista, right, who is now his wife. Yes, so as I said, it's the complicit media, and what I try to do is I give to FSTV, and I read your stuff, but I watch and I spread the word, and I tell people, have you ever watched Free Speech TV? Please watch them. I catch Steffi in the morning, and in the East Coast you start at 9, you start at 12, Randy starts at 3, and between you, I have a wealth of information, and then I'll compare it to what I see in the paper, on the news, and online, and overwhelmingly, it's not there. Yeah, I get it. Patrick, thank you. Thanks for your kind words, and good on you for being an evangelist for progressive media. Nancy, speaking of progressive media, listening to AM 950 in Minneapolis. Nancy, you're on the air.
Thanks, Tom. The truth is that we know there's something wrong with this country, isn't there? Truth be told, if we're looking for the guilty, we only need to look in the mirror. And that when we know that our voting system is already being rigged against us, voting isn't going to be enough. We need to occupy D.C. We need to go there with 3 million, 10 million people. We need to follow Hong Kong's example. People are protesting all over the planet because they're fed up with these autocratic people.
Yeah, I'm with you, Nancy, but I didn't sign up to be one of the people who was going to create the kind of America where Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan and George W. Bush line us into wars and Dick Cheney and Donald Trump were president. And I'm not willing to accept that blame, and I'm guessing neither are most of my fellow citizens. I don't think, I mean, this really concerns me. It's like people who say, oh, you know, global warming is a terrible thing, and therefore, how dare you drive a car or get on an airplane? I mean, at a certain point, you've got to point out it's not the individual who is causing these problems. It is the system. This is systemic, and the system has been hijacked by billionaires and fossil fuel companies and all these individual interests, and they are trying to protect their own power and their own wealth, and frankly, keep deep six to their own crimes. And so, you know, yes, we all need to get out in the streets. We all need to get active, but it is not our fault. Respectfully,
we're part of the system, and we may have been terrified to say anything.
I don't think most people are actually part of the system, Nancy. They have most Americans have no power outside of their vote, and in many states their vote doesn't simply. In fact, in the majority of states, their vote basically doesn't count because the state is so swung one direction or the other that you could vote or not vote, and it doesn't matter. And people get that. And that's why I think we need to have a national vote for president, for example. It would probably get more people out to vote. But, I'm not going to debate it with you or any farther anyway. I get your point, and I think that we're saying the same thing. We're just using different words. But thank you very much, Nancy. It's good to hear from you. John in Winchester, Indiana. Hey, John, what's up?
Tom, I think that Nancy Pelosi ought to cancel the State of the Union.
Because
let's play the game like the Republicans do. They wouldn't think a thing of it.
Yeah,
pulling a stunt like that.
Yeah, she would end up looking small if she did that. It would look like a revenge play or something like that. I think what we need to do is and thank you, John, for the call. And I think Nancy Pelosi can play a role in this, is getting out there and telling people in advance that if Donald Trump uses the State of the Union to brag about not being impeached or about not being removed from office, then that's a slur on democracy. That's a slam on our country. How dare he?
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archive.
And set it up in advance. Get people ready for this. So when it happens, and I guarantee it's going to happen, people will be disgusted. And welcome back. Let's see here. Javon in Los Angeles. Hey, Javon, what's up?
What's up, Professor? How are you doing today?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good, man. I thought I'd raise my head in class today because to answer your first question, at least give a clarification to your first question regarding tyranny. Am I correct?
Sure. Go for it.
Yeah, man. Well, first off, let me say the Trump crime family is an insult to mafia tactics.
Yeah,
let me just first say that because
they're the B-list mobsters.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like they far beyond fell, right?
Yeah.
Because Tammany Hall has created what we call our labor policies today, right?
Right.
And to have this flawed administration, the Trump family, do what they do is just an insult to our laws that have come out of like mafia tactics. Just want to get that out the way.
Okay. Amen.
So poor schools and the police state. Those two, in between those two, this is our uphill fight. Right, we have poor education system in America. We don't have civics anymore. We have social science, and I mean, like just look at LA system in general. Like our system in LA is one of the most failing school systems, and you want people to understand their rights, or the elements of their rights, and how to protest. And well, you're not even teaching that. Yeah. We don't teach that.
This is how you keep people down.
Yeah. on top of it, not only that we teach it, we oppress people with totally racist policies that we train our police with. and then the media just blasted out on TV. Another black guy dead, another child dead, police state, police state, police state.
Yep.
Right? Yep. and this is our uphill battle. Poor schools in a police state. And now we have this terrible racist person in the White House, and that's totally destroying the idea of America. This is the idea of our ideas of America, at least living together and thriving, surviving. Go ahead. I'm sorry, Mr. President.
Yeah, no. I was interrupting you, Javon. I'm with you, and I look at that rally in Richmond, and yesterday I was going to write an op-ed about it, and I just ran out of time, but I was looking through pictures of that, 22,000 white guys with guns in Richmond, Virginia, a couple weeks ago, and large chunks of them were wearing maggot hats. And it's like, I'm wondering if we're going to look back a few years from now at that rally and say, that was step 2 in the Second American Civil War, step 1 being the one a year earlier in Charlottesville.
Yep. Yeah, man. And, look, the best thing we can do is a political revolution. I have it written down right here. Yeah. Right? Bernie Sanders have it right. Political revolution. We need to show that love exists. We need to show that love exists. We've seen it before, like I said before in your program, when Obama became president, while Obama was running. Love exists. People came out. Thom Hartmann, I was called the ER when I was knocking on doors for Obama by a person who was voting for Barack Obama. He told the white family said after I gave them my rap, I'm wrapping up quickly. They said, "Hey man, we're gonna vote for the ER because we need our health care. We need health insurance." Yeah. Love you, Thom Hartmann.
Yeah, thank you, Javon. I appreciate the call. It's very kind of you. It's spot on. I think we're thinking alike here. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. Welcome back. Thom Hartmann here with me, or with you, rather, excuse me. On the line with me is Sharon in Browns Valley, California. Sharon, it says here that you say Trump doesn't have the power to suspend elections. Really?
That's correct. He does not. The Elections Clause of the Constitution, which is Article 1, Section 4, Clause 1, states the times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. So the mechanics and administration of an election is up to the state.
Yeah, but then it goes on to say, but the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations. And that's what they did with the Patriot Act. They said that it is, I believe, now maybe I'm wrong on this, and if I am, correct me, please. But my understanding is that the Patriot Act has a provision for suspending elections in times of national emergency.
If it does, it's not in plain sight because I skimmed through it before calling.
Okay.
And the adjustments that it's not up to the president, it's up to Congress.
Well, hang on just a second, Sharon. You and I are talking as if this president pays attention to what Congress does or what the Constitution says. Do you think that correct. Even if he had no legal basis at all to suspend the elections, if Trump was to say, I'm gonna move the elections back 2 weeks. I realize, but we've got a real crisis here. We got a war going on with Iran, or we got something. If he'll figure out something, or maybe he'll gin up something with one of his buddies like Duterte or Putin or somebody. Let's have a little conflict so that I can have a national emergency. And he declares a national emergency, and he says, I'm suspending the elections, and the Democrats come out and say, you can't do that. It's illegal. There's no, the Constitution doesn't give you the authority. Right. There's no law that gives you the authority. And Trump says, I alone can fix it. I alone can do this. I'm doing it on my own. Just like I extorted Ukraine on my own. I'm going to pull it off.
The Democrats
try to stop
are right. because the presidential authority is federal. It is not state. Congress would have to act with the states, or the president can tap dance and tantrum all he wants. But
he might not stop the election on November 3rd. He would just stop the federal part of the election, or maybe just start the presidential part. Stop the presidential part. Say, we're just not going to have a president on the ballot. It's just going to, or if the president is on the ballot, we're not going to recognize it because we've got credible evidence that the Democrats are going to be collaborating with President Maduro of Venezuela to hack the voting machines. We've got proof. What do we do?
Well, I'm just saying that we've got a better leg to stand on than just assuming he can pull this off.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you on that. So, but let's also keep in mind that anything that you can think of that he might do, he probably thinks he can do. And frankly, after what I've been watching here, I think he might get away with. Sharon, thank you for the call. Very thoughtful, or thought-provoking rather. Robin in Kingston, Washington. Hey, Robin, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I was provoked this morning about the question you asked earlier, which is when did this kind of Republican or whatever takeover? When did it start?
Right.
And each of the three, I think, transitional events in our country, in our modern history, you actually have your hands around and hands on, and I want to just tie them all together because you talk about them separately, and I look at them actually as tethered closely together. And there are three coups in our modern history that I would like to bring out and say are sort of well too associated. It's troubling. They're associated with each other. Okay, first is the JFK coup, which JFK situation, which was I consider to be an intel coup.
You're talking the assassination of Kennedy.
Yes, and that changed an election. The next one you talk about a lot, which is the 2000 stolen election, which I term as a political coup. This is where the Republicans learned how to control an election.
Yep.
The third one is the events on 9/11/2001, which I consider, being a truther and a peace activist, a military coup. And that event also kept an election intact, which was the Bush election.
Right.
So when I call up and I make a point and try to do something, I also try to provide a solution and something that we can do. And there are two things that I think we can do that your audience, being the elders, I think, in our nation, can do. And that is continue kind of waking up. And I call it waking up the great gray nappers. When they wake up, they become great grays. The second thing is the elders need to stop and you can steal this term, please, stop gray-splaining. You know about mansplaining, okay? The gray-haired people, elders, don't need to explain. The actions and the results of their work in the last 20, 30, 40, 50, and sometimes 60 years are doing all the explaining necessary. We need gray listening. So the bottom line of the story is the best way that your audience can help into the future is deal with the fact that we need to simply do better job at getting out the vote and then voting.
Yeah, I got it.
I just want to tell you.
No, Robin, I got it, and thank you. I think that the seminal moments, the really seminal moments, were Nixon's treason in 1968 and the Supreme Court's betrayal of America in 1976, which set up Reagan with the Buckley decision. And that's why I wrote the book, The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. I think that's where all of this really, really got rolling.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann.
book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment by yours truly. This is from Chapter 1, The Unholy Alliance of Racism, Genocide, and Guns. In Isaiah 14:21, the Lord tells Isaiah, "Prepare for his sons a place of slaughter because of the iniquity of their fathers." It's a variation on the old story of karma and seems in a very real way to be playing out today in the United States. America is facing an epidemic. Public health officials use that word of gun-related suicides, accidents, and even homicides and police killings. That epidemic has grown worse in the past decade, largely because the number of guns in America has increased, in large part because of the racial fears of white men who have bought guns in record numbers for 8 years during the time in office of America's first black president. A landmark 1999 study from researchers Franklin Zimmerman and Gordon Hawkins showed that the main correlation, far surpassing mental illness, socioeconomic status, or race, that could be defined as causal in predicting the rates of gun deaths is a simple number: the number of guns distributed among society. In the 30 years since that study, Zimmerman and Hawkins' results have been replicated and reanalyzed dozens of times. As the American Academy of Pediatrics said in a release published in AAAS's Science magazine, quote, "New research shows dramatic differences in the number of children hospitalized and killed each year in the U.S. from firearm-related injuries based on their state's gun legislation, even after adjusting for poverty, unemployment, and education rates. It found twice as many pediatric firearm deaths in states with the most lenient gun regulations compared to states where gun laws are strictest," end quote. They added that this is a critical issue for children, quoting Stephanie Cho, MD, the lead author of the abstract, quote, "Firearm-related injuries are the second leading cause of death among children in the United States, but we found a clear discrepancy in where those deaths happen that corresponds with the strengths of states' firearm legislation. In states with lenient laws, children die at alarmingly greater rates," end quote. And unsurprisingly, America not only has unusually lenient gun laws, but also has more guns in civilian hands than any other country in the world. America has a bit more than 4% of the world's population, but holds almost 50% of all the guns in civilian hands worldwide, more than 390 million guns. And the more guns a society has, the more gun deaths it will experience. The NRA and their army of lobbyists have been quite successful in making this happen. During Obama's presidency, there was a steady and hysterical drumbeat of articles, emails, and political proclamations by so-called pro-gun politicians and think tanks, suggesting that Obama was preparing to take away everyone's guns at any minute. There was even a subtext embraced by the hard right that he wasn't going to stop there. After disarming white Americans, these folks said, Obama was going to intern them in otherwise unused FEMA camps. Flipped-out gun owners were repeatedly arrested during the Obama years trying to break into retired or temporarily vacant military facilities and toxic waste sites, looking for evidence to prove that Obama was, in fact, preparing the modern-day version of the World War II-era Japanese internment camps. White supremacy was the founding notion of this nation. White Europeans thought themselves so superior to the human beings they met here in 1492 that Columbus himself became the first North American slaver, shipping Taino Indians back to Spain as slaves to the royal family. "A slave is as good as gold," Columbus wrote for the king and queen. Europeans in the Americas then stepped up that game into a hemisphere-wide campaign of racial genocide, pulling off the largest multi-generational mass murder in the history of the world. In the midst of that effort, they also created the legal mechanisms necessary to define and legally regulate slavery, and even built those systems into America's founding document, the Constitution. America was birthed in slavery and genocide, and both needed guns. It was the superior weaponry of guns that gave the European settlers a massive advantage over the bow and arrow-equipped Native Americans, and it was the raw power of widespread white ownership of guns in the South that propped up the institution of slavery for hundreds of years. Without guns, neither would have been possible, or at least neither would have been as easy as they were to pull off. And now, after centuries of guns being used to kill off and keep down people of color in America, those same guns are creating a terrifying epidemic of gun-facilitated violence, from public schools to private homes and public concerts. It's enough to make one think that Isaiah was onto something. Chapter 2, The Sanitized History of America. The United States' expansion and conquest in the late 18th century through the 19th century and into the 20th century is a history written by white men, inked in the blood of Native Americans, and built on the broken and bloody backs of enslaved people brought here from Africa. From 1791, when the Bill of Rights went into effect, until the end of the Civil War, the Second Amendment protected the rights only of white men to own guns. This is simply because until the ratification of the 14th Amendment, states determined who was recognized as a person protected under the Constitution. Initially, in most states, that meant that white men who owned land and paid taxes were the only people considered full citizens under the Constitution. In the South, white men with guns formed slave patrols to control slaves and formed posses to hunt escaped slaves. The book, The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America.
Want to connect with the show online? You can find the Thom Hartmann Program on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
Welcome back. Way back 2 hours ago when I started this show, I had Julio Rivera on, of the right-wing tilt, and asked him the question. Do you want to live in a country where President Bernie Sanders has virtually unlimited power and has no oversight from Congress? Now, I might think that's a good thing. Bernie would just say, okay, everybody's got Medicare. And Congress goes, what? Wait, we got to pass a law. No, I'm just going to mandate it by executive order. And in fact, one of the articles that is appearing at the National Review, the William F. Buckley's old publication, nationalreview.com, the headline, this is the right-wingers freaked out, right? The headline, Sanders plans to sign dozens of executive orders upon taking office, and then colon, quote, we cannot accept delays from Congress, close quote. Now, I know Bernie really well, and we're not best buds, but he was on my show every week for 11 years, and Louise and I have had any number of, private conversations and whatnot with him, and I have undying love and respect for Bernie Sanders. Period, full stop. I know that if Bernie's going to do stuff by executive order, it's going to be stuff that's reasonable and appropriate and stuff that Congress, in all probability, would not object to, and certainly the American people wouldn't. But Bernie is not going to be the last president of the United States. What happens when you get President Ted Cruz? Or President Liz Cheney? This is, what's going on in the Senate right now. The unwillingness of Mitch McConnell and the Republican senators to stand up for what's right is damaging our country. Without a system of checks and balances, without congressional oversight, Article 1 oversight of the Article 2 branch, the executive branch, the president, and the agencies that work for him. And now we had Adam Schiff repeated this yesterday in answer to a question, that the CIA is now refusing, or the NSA, I guess it is now refusing to give intelligence information to the Intelligence Committee, which Adam Schiff is the chairman of. Now, that's not just a violation of the law, that's a violation of the Constitution. But they're saying that Trump told them not to do it, and so they're not going to do it because they work for Trump. Well, the Constitution provides that the House provide oversight. The House is the agency, the federal, the part of the tripartite government. The House is the part that is closest to the people because the elections are held every 2 years. That's why only the House of Representatives can appropriate money, that is to say, spend money. Only the House of Representatives can appropriate taxes, or can, whatever the word is for tax, raise taxes. And only the House of Representatives can initiate a declaration of war. All legislation has to originate in the House because it's the closest to the people. Every 2 years, the House has to decide whether we're going to continue to have an army, literally. So to say, no, the House can't have oversight over the executive branch, that's, whether it was President Bernie Sanders or President Liz Cheney, or President, fill in the blank, whatever, they shouldn't have that much power. But that's what McConnell is doing here. And for that matter, you go back to McConnell holding open Merrick Garland's seat, apparently knowing that the election was going to be rigged and hacked and the Republican was going to win no matter who it was. And I don't think when he started holding Merrick Garland that we yet knew that Donald Trump was going to be the Republican nominee. But McConnell exercised too much power, and frankly, I think he should have been impeached for doing that. We are going down a road which is just a very, very dangerous thing. By the way, the executive orders that National Review is all hysterical about, that Bernie's actually got a staff that is putting together, how are we going to hit the ground running day one if we become president? And they write several of the executive, actually, they're probably writing it like this. Oh my God, several of the executive orders would reverse Trump's policies on immigration, including an immediate halt of border wall construction, removing a limit on accepting refugees for asylum, and reinstituting the Obama-era DACA program. Other orders include a ban on the exportation of crude oil to combat climate change, and the severing of any federal contracts with companies that pay employees less than $15 an hour. And then they note Kamala Harris had promised to institute gun control policies by executive fiat and knocked fellow candidate Joe Biden for his refusal to do so. And then they point out that Trump declared a national emergency to divert money to the border wall, and they're very, very worried that a President Sanders might do the same. And this is the real issue. Nancy Pelosi held a press conference this morning. You got to hear this. She's talking about what I'm talking about here. This is what's really at stake, and it's very rarely being discussed on television. Occasionally you'll get a commentator who goes off on this. But this, I think, is really what's going on here. Here's Nancy Pelosi. This is kind of faint, Sean. You're probably going to have to crank it up a little bit.
We have a situation. We have a situation where, again, the fate of our nation is riding on how this is resolved. It isn't about just one person. It's about the precedent that it sets for the future. It's not about whether you like Donald Trump or not. It's not about it's not personal, it's not political, it's not partisan. It's about patriotism. It's about undermining the system of checks and balances, and that is what they are doing on the Senate floor.
And see, this is exactly what I'm talking about. And she's absolutely right. What these Republican senators are saying is that they will not do their jobs, that they will not consider this impeachment inquiry seriously. Nancy continues, Sean, if you've still got it up.
in these days. I guess they'll go in about 1 o'clock today. How shameful of them. And then again, when you think of the sacrifice of our founders, and Thomas Paine said, the times have found us in the darkest days of the revolution, to declare independence, to fight a war, to win it, to write our founding documents. For Benjamin Franklin to say, when asked about what government we have, a republic if we can keep it. I often wondered why he said that, as if it could ever be in doubt, except this president has placed it in doubt by saying that Article 2 says I can do whatever I want.
There you go. I mean, this was Nancy Pelosi this morning. In fact, I'll retweet this right now with a comment that says amen. If you want to see the whole clip, just go to my Twitter feed. And this is, I mean, we have to take this seriously. There's massive corruption going on in this White House. You know, I talked about Jared Kushner and Ivanka Trump and all the patents and trademarks coming out of China and all that stuff. In the last hour, you know, it's worth noting. But what happens when Bill Barr's investigations, you know, Bill Barr opened investigations into Jim Comey and Hillary Clinton, and, you know, I believe Mr. Clapper, you know, the former director of national intelligence, he opened investigations into these people. Well, what if he had come out and said, well, I found a crime. We're going to arrest these people. What if Trump starts arresting his political opponents? What are we going to do? Is Congress going to stop him? I mean, that's the path we're on. That's the trajectory that you see in the Philippines with Duterte, in India with Modi, in Russia with Putin, in Hungary with Viktor Orban, in Poland with Duda. In now Jair Bolsonaro in Brazil, going after the Bolsonaro is going after the reporter for The Intercept.
Greenwald.
Yeah, Glenn Greenwald. Thank you. Brain fart. And I mean, this is what autocrats do. Glenn Greenwald and his husband, who's a member of the parliament in Brazil, outed some corruption in the Bolsonaro administration. And so what's he doing? He's charging them with crimes. That's what's going to be next on Trump's plate if he's reelected. He's going to start arresting people. You mark my words. If he is reelected, the reign of terror will begin. And you're going to see more and more of these. You know, in Richmond, you had 22,000 white guys show up, with many of them wearing MAGA hats, with guns, semi-automatic weapons. That's going to start becoming a very common, very frequent, very normal, in quotes, appearance event. You're going to see more and more of these kind of Dylan Roof characters. I mean, Trump has already activated these. The guy who literally sent a bomb to all the senior Democrats, one each. You know, the good news is he was an incompetent bomb maker. The bad news is he actually got them through to a lot of these people. And he was living in a van covered with Trump memorabilia and paraphernalia and bumper stickers and things. I mean, we need to take this seriously. This, you know, when Nancy Pelosi says this could be the end of our republic, or at least the way that we understand it, she is not exaggerating. She is not being hysterical. She's not fear-mongering. When she says this isn't about one particular man or ideology or politics, she's absolutely right. It's about a form of government. We'll be back.
This is the Thom Hartmann Program.
I'll be back with your thoughts on where this is all going, where it all came from, how it plays out in just a few minutes. And welcome back. Sarah in Fort Worth, Texas. Hey, Sarah. Thanks for watching Free Speech TV. What's on your mind?
Hang on a second. I was taking you off the speaker. Quickly, before I forget, did I get it right?
Yeah, you're on. I hear you just fine, sir. What's up?
Okay, good. For you always talk about the watercolor or water.
The water cooler wars.
Yes. So what I've started doing, I ran into a diehard Trump supporter, and so he wouldn't listen to me, so I started singing Sound of Music tunes.
The hills are alive.
Exactly. And I said, if we didn't have immigrants, we wouldn't have Sound of Music. So I would highly suggest that everybody just break out in song. Now, back to what I originally called. I was catching up on The View this morning in between, like, commercial breaks and stuff. And Alan Dershowitz was on there.
Really?
Yes.
Yeah.
And he started out and he said that he was not the attorney for the idiot, but for the Constitution.
All right, that's his shtick. He's really, Alan Dershowitz, he always gloms onto these very high-profile cases because he's a publicity hound, He's desperate for publicity. He's one of these people who thinks that if everybody doesn't know his name, he's going to shrink down to nothing and vanish or something.
I mean, the main thing, the bait and switch is what I'm a little concerned about, because later on, one, he was talking over everybody, and Whoopi was like, okay, I'm going to cut you off if you're going to keep doing this, and I respect you for doing the same. If you're not going to talk truth, then, there's no reason to put you on. But then later he said that he had talked to the idiot. I don't like to say his name.
Yeah.
And
Mr. T. Rump.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yes, exactly. And he said, he brought up the fact that, that the whole scandal with Epstein would come up, and was he sure that he wanted him to be his attorney? And then the idiot said yes.
Yeah.
And so,
well, Trump.
If you look at the.
I'm sorry.
No. He said he wasn't his attorney because he was the attorney of the Constitution.
Right.
And then at the end of the interview, he completely changed and said, yes, he was the attorney to the idiot.
Right. Dershowitz will say whatever is going to get him in front of a camera. The thing is, Trump is putting him there because Donald Trump understands media. He worked for NBC for 11 years that Apprentice show was on, and and they had media experts. They taught Donald Trump how to be a reality TV star, and he is using those lessons right now, every single day in the White House. Sarah, thank you for the call. But that's what's going on. You're seeing a show. The White House, Donald Trump has been putting on a show from day one. And by the way, you know who's the White House communications director now? Bill Shine. What did Bill Shine do before that? Well, before he got busted for in the Me Too stuff, he ran Fox News. Right underneath Roger Ailes. He knows how to put on a show. That's what's going on. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. And I would add our full 3-hour podcasts are available over at thomhartmann.com. Kenyatta in Los Angeles. Hey, Kenyatta, what's on your mind today?
How are you, Mr. Hartmann?
I am great, but I'll get better. I assume the same is true of you.
Yep. Well, listen, I wanted to just, you had a caller a couple of hours ago, actually, earlier in the show, call and very eloquently speak about her father being a racist and against welfare programs. And it really touched me. But I do want to say, and hopefully she's still listening, it has always been the fact that the vast majority of welfare recipients are white people.
That's right.
So I don't know how that's reconciled. He was racist, but he was against only because of welfare policies. But anyways, what I wanted to talk about is you had mentioned a moment ago a dangerous road that we're on. And you know, Thom Hartmann, I have, from the time that Donald Trump announced his candidacy, said he would be president. The United States is on the road to perdition because you've got to understand the rhetoric that these folks are using right now. I was listening to right-wing radio recently because I do that. I want to know what they're saying. I want to know what their talking points are. And they're using words and phrases like, Donald Trump is one of us.
Yep.
I heard one say yesterday, the impeachment is a call to arms.
Yep.
They're using the term civil war.
Yep.
I have a friend who is an arms dealer, a legitimate one. And his business is going through the roof right now.
Mm-hmm.
This is very dangerous stuff. And one of the reasons, and, as a black man in this country I've been exposed in my life, and I'm not going to be shy about it, particularly because of who I am, all types of vehement racism, because I've been in an environment where I was the only black person many, many times. And so I've seen it in a way that most black people probably have not. And I'm going to tell you something. I've been disgusted with the United States for a long time. But what you have right now is something different. You've got a populace that is disgusted and despondent, Tom. And when people become disgusted and despondent, they become one of two things. They either become desperate or anesthetized. And I believe that the latter is what is happening. I don't think that anyone really knows how dangerous this situation is. Donald Trump has changed the political dynamic forever in the United States. Forever.
We've got concentration camps down south, for God's sake. Actually, they're building them all over the country. Concentration camps where we had this week, 2 people died in the custody of ICE. Just as a starting point, not to mention all the other horrors. But who would have thought in America that we would have concentration camps?
Well, Tom, listen, this is a guy. In 4 years, listen, like I said, I've been disgusted with the United States for a long time. I don't stand for the flag. I don't do any of those things. But there was decorum. There was some decency. This is a guy who calls people names. He uses foul language. He has given a not-so-silent dog whistle to these idiots like the 22,000 that you talked about. He's given them license to do this stuff. And mind you, before he became president, there was the Bundy case in Nevada.
Finish your thought. You got 10 seconds.
Oh, no, I just wanted to say, Tom, we're just on some dangerous ground here, and I hope that people really realize how serious this is.
Yeah, I'm with you, Kenyatta. I am starting to get very concerned. This is like Civil War-ish stuff, and it really concerns me. Kenyatta, thank you. It's good to hear from you. We'll be back.
You're listening to the Thom Hartmann Program. Call 202-808-9925.
We'll be back with more of your calls and the news of the day right after this. I'm going to update you on the Wuhan virus, too. There's some news. Stick around. Our book today in the Thom Hartmann Book Club is Proof of Conspiracy, How Trump's International Collusion is Threatening American Democracy by Seth Abramson. This is from the introduction. In late 2015, after Donald Trump has formally announced his candidacy for president, a geopolitical conspiracy emerges overseas, whose key participants are the leaders of Russia, Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt. These 6 men decide that Trump is the antidote to their ills. For Russia, U.S. sanctions. For Israel, the lack of Arab allies. For For Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, and Egypt perceive threats emanating from Iran. The conspirators commit themselves to doing whatever is necessary to ensure that Donald Trump is elected. Trump's presidential campaign is aware of and benefits from this conspiracy both before and after the 2016 election. On March 19, 2018, British journalist David Hurst, the former chief foreign leader writer for The Guardian, publishes the most important report of his career. Hurst, at one time the Moscow bureau chief at The Guardian, is now editor-in-chief of his own publishing venture, a London-based Middle East watchdog called the Middle East Eye. In the spring of 2018, he reports the existence of a years-long, continent-spanning conspiracy that will eventually envelop the President of the United States, the Red Sea Conspiracy. This book denominates the conspiracy Hurst uncovers as the Red Sea Conspiracy for the simple reason that it is hatched on a yacht in the middle of the Red Sea, a seawater inlet of the Indian Ocean bordered by, among other countries, Saudi Arabia and Egypt. One imagines that in his many years as a correspondent and commentator for The Scotsman, The Huffington Post, Al Jazeera, El Arabi, Al Jaid, TRT World, which is Turkish, Masr al-Aghan, Egypt, and The Guardian, Hurst never thought he'd stumble on a story as far-reaching in its implications as the Red Sea Conspiracy. But he did, and what he found could change the course of history. This book chronicles the events around the globe that preceded and followed the fall 2015 origin of the conspiracy, with a special focus on how the conspiracy prompted Donald Trump and his aides, allies, and associates to covertly collude with 6 countries, both before and after the 2016 presidential election: Russia, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Israel, Bahrain, and Egypt. Events that began on the Red Sea in 2015 now influence President Trump's foreign policy toward all of these countries, toward other countries not involved in the conspiracy, such as Qatar and Iran, and more broadly toward Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. The story of the Red Sea Conspiracy begins with a man named George Nader. As reported by Hurst in the Middle East Eye, toward the end of 2015, Nader, then an advisor to the Crown Prince of Abu Dhabi, Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, known as MBZ, convened, with his patron's permission, a summit of some of the Middle East's most powerful leaders. Gathered on a boat in the Red Sea in the fall of 2015 were Mohammed bin Salman, known as MBS, Deputy Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia, who would shortly become the heir apparent to the throne of the Saudi Kingdom; MZB himself, by 2015 the de facto ruler of the United Arab Emirates; Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, the president of Egypt; Prince Salman bin Hamad, the Crown Prince of Bahrain; and King Abdullah II of Jordan. Nader, the improbable maestro of these rulers' clandestine get-together, intended the plan he posed to the men to include the nation of Libya, but no representative from that nation attended the gathering. Of the leaders aboard the yacht, 2, MBS and MBZ, are already close. According to a New Yorker interview with Richard A. Clarke, a counterterrorism advisor to Presidents Barack Obama and George W. Bush, MBS and MBZ, quote, talk on the phone all day to each other, end quote. The Red Sea meeting, although technically convened by Nader, is a means for MBZ to advance ambitions that he and MBS have designed together. The 2 Sunni Arab leaders' intention, Hurst records, is to remake the Middle East with the covert assistance of a highly placed American politician. They intend to do this by first renaming and reconstituting the membership of the 6-member Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, which in 2015 comprises Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar, while reorienting, too, its regional ambitions and global alliances. The proposed GCC realignment would evict Kuwait, Oman, and Qatar from the Council and replace these 3 countries with Egypt, Jordan, and Libya, thereby eliminating the entity's historical association with the Persian Gulf and remaking it as, instead, an alliance constituting, quote, an elite regional group of 6 countries which would supplant the GCC and form the nucleus of a coalition of pro-U.S. and pro-Israeli states in the Middle East, end quote. According to 2 sources briefed on the 2015 Red Sea Summit, quote, Nader said this group of states could become a force in the region that the United States government could depend on to counter the influence of Turkey and Iran, end quote. Prior to 2015, Turkey and Saudi Arabia had intermittently enjoyed strong diplomatic ties. The book Proof of Conspiracy by Seth Abramson. Hey, my new book, The Hidden History of the War on Voting, Who Stole Your Vote and How to Get It Back, is arriving in bookstores on February 10th. More information is available at all fine bookstores. I cover how the heartbeat of democracy depends on the vote. This book goes into depth on the racist legacy of our vote and the unique struggles of African Americans, women, and Native Americans. In part 2, there's a deep dive into the economic royalist modern war on voting. And part 3 is the solution section, how to get out there and get active. I'm also on the road to the book tour for The Hidden History of Voting. Join me on Monday, February 17th in San Francisco for the Berkeley Arts and Letters series, on Wednesday, February 19th at Town Hall, Seattle, Sunday, February 23rd for the Blue State Ball in Minneapolis, Friday, February 28th at Powell's in Portland, and Sunday, March 1st in Chicago. More information is available at thomhartmann.com. This book is the third in the series after The Hidden History of Guns and the Second Amendment and The Hidden History of the Supreme Court and the Betrayal of America. Back 35 minutes past the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. The CDC, there's good news and bad news, or let me rephrase that. There's bad news and good news about the Wuhan virus. The bad news, the CDC has confirmed the first case of person-to-person transmission of the virus with an American. Now, this is a 60-year-old woman in Chicago who was diagnosed after returning last month from Wuhan, China. And she got it from somebody in Wuhan. So this is, person-to-person transmission and a person here in the United States. Now, so far, there's no evidence that she's infected anybody in Chicago. So, that's the good news, I guess. The other good news is that they're starting, this is, by the way, I'm getting this all from the Financial Times. They have a really good in-depth piece on this right now. And they've got this comparison chart comparing the contagion index, or whatever whatever it's called, the how contagious an individual disease is, and the way that they calculate that is the average number of people who are infected, by somebody who has this disease. So the average person who has measles infects between 12 and 18 other people. That's highly contagious. The average person with smallpox or polio infects between 5 and 8 other people. It's relatively contagious. The average person with mumps infects between 3 and 8 other people. I remember when I was a kid, we used to go to mumps parties and measles parties, for that matter. This is before vaccines. Boy, does that sound old, doesn't it? Anyhow, the average person with AIDS will infect between 3 and 5 people. The average person with SARS will infect between 3 and 5 people. The average person with the seasonal flu will infect between 2 and 4 people. The average person with Ebola will infect between 2 and 3 people. And then we get to coronavirus. The average person seems to be infecting 2 to 3 people. So it is nowhere near as infectious or contagious as measles or polio or mumps or even SARS or Ebola. So I guess that's the good news. But, as I keep pointing out, the other shoe that's going to drop is going to be the economic one. When large chunks of China are shut down, we have some friends of friends who live in China, not in the affected area, who are telling us that basically most of the country is just like closed down. People are not going out. People are not buying things. And NPR was reporting this morning that in parts of Wuhan, they're starting to run out of food. So this is going to have a knock-on effect. So, just get ready. Anyhow, Tim in Tucson, Arizona. Tim, what's on your mind today?
Hey, Tom. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
You asked a question earlier about where the origin points of what's going on started. I just wanted to point out there's a great interview by Norm Ornstein on Al Franken, and he goes into this pretty well. He points out, the upsetting of norms that happened with the passage of the civil rights legislations in the 60s, how that took the norm that said, you people know your place, and blew that up. And, of course, that was followed by the other movements, the women's movements and the gay movements. So that can be an origin point. But he also goes into the coming of Newt Gingrich, who went in to blow up the actions of, being consensus, because he saw that Congress was owned by the Democrats for like 24 sessions.
Right. So all the way ever since 1932. Yeah, Newt Gingrich came in and he broke all the norms for governance, and I think that you could make a strong case that Mitch McConnell is the logical extension of Newt Gingrich's understanding of how governance should be done by a legislative body, or by the leadership of a legislative body. Yeah, I'm with you, Tim. That's a good one. Thanks for calling in and sharing that. I appreciate it. Sandy in Sonoma, California, listening to 910 AM out of San Francisco. Sandy, what's up?
Hi, Tom. Thank you for the wisdom you impart every day. My question is, who is paying for the farcical dream team a la Dershowitz that Trump has assembled? Are we the taxpayers? Can he use campaign money, PAC money, or will they be willing to tell us in 20 years? Well,
yeah, probably the latter. Dershowitz insists he's not being paid. I'd be surprised if Pam Bondi did anything without being paid. And probably that's true of the rest of the team. I'm guessing that they're being paid for by his campaign. His campaign has been paying the legal expenses of his son. His campaign has been paying his own legal expenses. For lawsuits like Gene Cummings, I think, Gene Cummings, the woman who was the columnist, the advice columnist that Trump raped in Bergdorf Goodman, in the department store in New York City back in the 90s. She just today, the news came out, she is trying to serve Trump with a demand for a DNA sample because she apparently still has the dress from when Trump raped her. And E. Jean Carroll, thank you, Sean. E. Jean Carroll. And so, there's that's all being paid for out of his campaign funds. Trump never pays for anything himself. He's either too cheap or too broke or both. But I think that's what's going on. Sandy, thanks for the call and thanks for raising that. James in Spokane, Washington. James, what's up?
Hey, Tom. How are you today, sir?
Good. What's up?
Yeah, me too. I'm not in jail. I'm not in the hospital, so that's pretty good.
There you go. It's a good start.
Want to talk about Trump. The guy is just so disabled. Tom, to get against his supporters, I can't imagine a Christian person, which many of them are, you give them that much. They try and be moral people. They got to be responsible. They wouldn't vote. We need to point out to them how much he's lied and just ask them yes or no. Is that okay with them?
Yeah.
And more details and repeatedly over and over again about the children at the Mexican border. Point it out to them and ask them, is that okay with them?
Or the children who have died, for that matter, and the children who are going to be scarred for life, and already are.
Some are being slave traded. Tom, that's bound to be happening.
Yeah, no, you've got several thousand missing children. I mean, where do they go? That's what happens.
Another historical reference I want to ask you about. It's about collusion between the Republicans and the Democrats.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that Billy Bob Clinton was unaware that the cocaine was coming in through Mena, Arkansas at the time?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. Thanks a lot for the call. Karen in Morton Grove, Illinois. Hey, Karen, what's up?
Hi, Tom. You got me very, very worried when you mentioned earlier that President Trump can delay the election. Was that factual?
I'm trying to find out. My understanding was that the ability to postpone an election was built into the Patriot Act, but I may well be wrong on that. But my point was, the larger point, was that Trump has done a bunch of things that are not allowed for by our law or our Constitution, and he still gets away with them. And I wouldn't put this past him, even if there's no legal basis for it.
That's true. Well,
I mean,
now you got me all stressed out.
Yeah, well, don't get stressed out. Wait until it happens, and then go out in the streets. But or if it happens, God forbid. It's. But Karen, thank you for the call. Kirk in Ukiah, California. Kirk, what's on your mind?
Oh, it's just a comment or a prediction, I guess you might say.
Mm-hmm.
I'm afraid that Biden will get the nomination in the second ballot when the superdelegates are allowed, and then he will lose to Trump. But I hope I'm wrong, and I'll take my comment off the air. Thanks.
That is a scenario that comports with conventional wisdom in the Democratic Party. Is that there will be too many candidates in the first ballot for anybody to get the 2,000 out of the 4,000 necessary. And in the second ballot, you have an additional roughly 800 superdelegates, and maybe a dozen or 24 of them would go for a progressive candidate. The rest of them are all, kind of pre-committed to the corporate candidates, and you'll end up with Joe Biden as the nominee. And if Joe stumbles between now and then, you'll end up with Amy Klobuchar as the nominee. And in which case Donald Trump gets reelected. I don't know that that's necessarily accurate. I think that on the one hand, Trump has been so vile, so disgusting, so fundamentally evil in many of his behaviors. I mean, again, children in cages and sold into slavery and God only knows what, and hustling patents and trademarks for his daughter, and hustling $1 billion for his son-in-law, and his other sons, going out there doing big game hunting and all this other stuff. I mean, it's just, there's enough disgust, I think, that it's maybe possible that any Democratic candidate could beat Trump. On the other hand, he has not yet begun to really, I mean, they're pouring money in through Facebook right now, and Facebook and Zuckerberg are totally, in the bag for Trump as far as I can tell. And again, Judd Legum has yesterday's piece over at popular.info is all about how Facebook is in bed with Trump and what they're up to and what they're doing. We cannot take it for granted that Trump can't win. He can. And we need to be vigilant and active.
You're listening to Thom Hartmann. Visit thomhartmann.com for audio and video archives.
45 minutes past the hour. We'll be back with more of your calls in just a moment. And welcome back. Brandon in Wildwood, Missouri. Hey, Brandon, thanks for watching us on YouTube. What's up?
Hey, Tom. I did 20 years in the military. I got 2 Bronze Stars. If I got to wait an hour and 51 minutes, I'm coming to Oregon and you're doing push-ups, okay?
Okay. Why is that?
Hey, well, what I want to talk about is that the Republican Party squandered this because they had their champions, which is Rubio and Ted Cruz, and that would have secured the Latino vote for them. But when Donald Trump came down the escalator and said Mexicans are rapists, that just totally destroyed the future of the Republican Party. And the Republican Party needs to, go against Trump at this impeachment so they can rebuild that connection with the Latino vote. They'll never get the black vote, which is only about 8% of the voters anyway, and now they just squandered the Latino vote. They destroyed the Republican Party. That's why they needed. That's why they're going all in with Trump to try to get the Supreme Court. Therefore, it doesn't matter if the Democrats control all the White House, the House, and the Senate. If they pass the bill, they'll just take it all to the Supreme Court, and therefore they will win in the Supreme Court because they'll have more conservative judges. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It took them almost 50 years to gut the Civil Rights Act, but they did. It took them just a year to gut Obamacare. I would love to see the Republican Party return to some semblance of sanity, at least back to Dwight Eisenhower kind of Republican Party. But I think that train has left the station, Brandon. These guys have signed up with Satan. they are, and they're willing to take the country down with them. And it concerns me tremendously. Thanks a lot for the call, Brandon. Claudia in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Hey, Claudia, what's up?
Hi, Tom. I'm so happy to speak with you. I just discovered you guys about a month ago, and I haven't changed the channel since.
Oh, wonderful.
I just wanted to say I am a senior citizen. I'm 85. Mm-hmm. And what can my friends and I do? You know, we can't march and we can't do all the things that we did before.
Sure.
What can we do to try to get this man out of office? He scares the bejesus out of all of us.
Yeah, I'm with you, Claudia. It says here Michelle Obama's dad was your classmate? Is that true?
Yes.
That is so cool. That is so cool. Well, what people can do who are retired, or who are not physically able to get out and go door to door or march in the streets or whatever. There's a lot of electronic stuff that can be done if you're comfortable with or familiar with how to get around the internet. But you've got friends, you've got relatives, you may have Facebook. It's just tell everybody what you know. And I say at the end of the show every day, tell people about where to find progressive media. If you're finding value in the programming here on Free Speech TV, try to evangelize, a person a week, right? And then over the course of the year, you've changed 50 people's lives, So that's my advice. Claudia, I'm sorry we're hitting the break. I've got to run, but thank you for your call. It's so nice to hear from you, and I'm so glad you found us, and I do appreciate it. We'll be right back. It's 10 minutes before the hour. Stick around. Our free Hartmann Report podcast recaps the show every day. It's available wherever you find great podcasts. Welcome back. 10 minutes before the hour. Thom Hartmann here with you. Jeff in Portland, listening on X-Ray FM. Hey, Jeff, what's up?
Hey, good morning, Tom. Thanks for taking my call. I want to agree and expound on a point you've been making this week, and that is because the Trump crime family is such an imminent threat to our democracy, not to mention life on earth as we know it. Mm-hmm. It's really imperative that the Democrats go all in tomorrow in order to compel witnesses and documents. Yes. As I said last week, not only should Senator Van Hollen reintroduce his amendment, which acknowledges Chief Justice Roberts' role to allow this, something consistent with the founder's intent in the Federalist Papers, specifically number 65. But furthermore, Tom, as you've said, let the Bidens testify if that's what it takes. At the very least, you'll strip the Republicans bare of any and all excuses going forward. You will have called their bluff and said enough is enough. And finally, as you've also said, if Biden, I'm a Bernie guy or Elizabeth, but if Biden's our nominee, we can't let any of his son's baggage blow up right before the general election, just as Hillary's FBI case did, thanks to Comey.
I agree with you. And Elizabeth Drew has an op-ed in today's New York Times, It's right up at the top of the page. It's titled, "Why Having Hunter Biden Testify Would Be Bad for Trump." And I completely basically making the same points I am, that number one, if there's no agree with her and she's there, then having Hunter and Joe testify will blow up on the Republicans. It'll make them look like idiots. If there is a there, we damn well better find out now instead of in October.
I'll check that out. I mean, she's a good writer, so yeah. I mean, I didn't even think about that. So, and if this trial drags on, I would say Bernie and Elizabeth might consider nominating their vice presidential picks to go campaign for them if that's what it's going to take. So don't let the length of the trial be a concern over the 2020 campaign. I think all the Democrats in the Senate have disconnected from that. We're here. We're going to stay here. We're going to do our job. I think all of them have surrogates who are campaigning for them in Iowa and New Hampshire
And, it just continues. Jeff, thank you for the call. Spot on. Brad in Elk Grove, Illinois. Hey, Brad, what's up?
I've not heard anything explaining.
Brad, I'm sorry. I can't hear your phone. Brad's on line 1, Lise, if you want to check that out. Janet in Des Plaines, Illinois. Janet, what's on your mind?
Hi, Tom. I have a suggestion. In addition to calling our senators, call the Sergeant of Arms. I have the number here.
The Sergeant at Arms cannot make independent decisions.
But the message goes to Chief Justice Roberts. So I called, talked to a live person. They record your message, and they forward that to the Chief Justice. And I asked for him if it's in his power to allow for witnesses to testify. Otherwise, it's a sham trial, and it's setting a very dangerous precedent for our future.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's going to be the proposal that the Democrats are going to start tomorrow with. And, it'll probably get shot down, but we'll see.
Let me give you the number, because I got through right away. 202-224-2341.
2341. Cool. Thank you, Janet. Appreciate it. Tim in Belle Plaine, Iowa. Hey, Tim. How's Iowa?
Iowa's going fine. Waiting for the caucuses to get it over with. I believe he is capable of arresting the Democratic nominee.
He being Trump?
Trump, yes. He's already proven he'll assassinate someone for attention. He's
with Soleimani,
dangerous. Yep. And Barr got hired because of his performance at the end of Iran-Contra. This is truly dangerous, and I don't think everybody understands how evil can be.
Yeah, I am completely with you. I am completely with you, Tim. Kurt in Los Angeles. Kurt, final thoughts here for the day?
Hey, Tom. Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
I haven't heard all of your show, but I wanted to reiterate a point you probably touched on, and that is I think we need to make this an issue about the entire the modern Republican Party. This is not the Republican Party of Eisenhower, Pete McCloskey, Alan Simpson. Remember, under Nixon, we actually had a Republican Attorney General who refused to obstruct justice. So they have basically gone.
Elliot Richardson, but he, John Mitchell had no problem obstructing justice. He went to jail for it. Yeah. But I get your point, Kurt, and I mourn the loss of that Republican Party. My dad was one of those Republicans, and they like I said earlier, they've sold their soul to the devil. Thanks a lot for the call, Kurt. Carol in Monessen, Pennsylvania. Carol, we got about a half a minute here. You want to make a quick comment?
I just wanted to say that I don't know whether it was Buckley versus Vallejo or the Trump doctor or the Powell doctrine or whatever started it, but the chickens have all come home to roost.
Yes.
And we're going to pay a high price for it. It's going to be like a police state. And how long do you think it's going to be before he decides that the Washington Post and the New York Times have to be closed down for dissenting from his policies?
I think it'll be about 3 months after he gets reelected, if that's what happens.
Exactly. It scares me to death.
And by the way, he won't be the first president to have done that. President John Adams shut down over 20 newspapers because he didn't like the way that they were covering him. So there's actually precedent for this. Carol, thank you for the call. It's not that weird. It's not that wild. John Adams was the second president of the United States. He was one of the founders of this republic, and he put reporters in prison. He put member of Congress Matthew Lyon in prison. Lyon ran for re-election in the election of 1800 from a jail cell in Vergennes, Vermont. Anyhow, get out there, get active, tag You're It, and tell your friends and neighbors and relatives how to find good progressive media. We'll see you tomorrow.
You've been listening to Thom Hartmann. For audio and video archives, visit thomhartmann.com.